Chapter 21, and into the fire. A brilliant, otherworldly spiral blasted forth, coiling and writhing like a serpent preparing to strike. As it left Piccolo's fingertips, the spiraling energies merged seamlessly, forming a singular, majestic drilling beam that pierced through the air and landed straight onto Raditz's chest. For a moment, the beam stayed still as if frozen in time before it pierced through Raditz, then through Goku, then through part of Ajax's hand, and finally past them. In the aftermath of the devastating attack, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a breathtaking display, the tip of the distant mountain in the distance erupted with a brilliant explosion. The once majestic peak crumbled in on itself, its form obliterated by the overwhelming force of Piccolo's attack. As if the mountain's explosion served as a signal, both Raditz and Goku staggered and collapsed to the ground in unison, gaping holes in their chests. Damn it! Raditz sputtered, his voice weak and trembling as he lay sprawled on the ground. Why, you fools! Ajax, whose hand had been caught in the path of the special beam cannon, knelt on the ground, grunting in excruciating pain as a substantial portion of his hand disintegrated under the attack. Despite his body having adapted to endure heightened levels of pain, Ajax still struggled to suppress his screams. Daddy! From the sidelines, Gohan couldn't bear to watch his father in such dire conditions any longer. With tears streaming down his face, he broke free from Krillin's protective embrace and rushed to his father's side. This time, however, no one could blame the young boy for breaking down into inconsolable sobs. Goku, summoning every ounce of his remaining strength, managed to offer his son some reassurance. It's going to be... Oh, okay, Gohan, he stammered through his pain, his words laden with effort. IW won't be gone for... too long. Krillin, his worry etched across his face, dashed over to Goku's side as well. Goku, keep it together, buddy. I'll go to Master Korin right now and get you a senzu bean. You'll be all right. A feeble chuckle escaped Goku's lips. Ha! You and I both know that I won't last that long. Goku's voice quivered, and his entire body spasmed with agony as he tried to hold on. Goku mustered a weak but genuine smile as he looked down at Gohan, his son, the beacon of his hope and love. Good kid, learn lots, eat lots, and listen to your MO mother. Love you. At that moment, it was clear that Goku's strength had left him. His eyes, once filled with boundless determination and strength, dulled as if a spark had been extinguished. And just like that, Son Goku, the savior of the earth, breathed his last and died. As Goku died, tears mixed with snot streamed down Gohan's face as he began to bawl his grief. Krillin too had tears as he clenched his fists and pounded them on the ground. They clung to Goku's now lifeless form, their sobs echoing in the somber atmosphere. A few feet away, Ajax, witnessing Goku's death, felt a wave of relief wash over him. That's one objective down. With unsteady steps, he rose to his feet, cradling his injured hand, and approached Raditz, who lay on the ground, struggling to articulate words through a mouth filled with pooling blood. Earth natives are compatible with Saiyans genetically. This planet is the Saiyans' future. From Raditz's scouter, a deep voice transmission crackled through, muffled but still comprehensible to Ajax and Piccolo, both of whom had approached the incapacitated Raditz. I already know. I've been periodically checking in to make sure you're fine. Vegeta had me deactivate the comms channel for the final battle over here, but I've been keeping an eye on you. You did good, Raditz. Raditz released an odd noise from the back of his throat. Ajax looked down at Raditz, taken aback by the peculiar noise that escaped the Saiyan warrior. To his surprise, he witnessed something even more astonishing. Raditz was starting to cry too. It felt uncharacteristic of him, so much so that Ajax momentarily forgot his next set of objectives, entranced at Raditz's moment of vulnerability. This was not in the canon. Right before Ajax's eyes, and on the cusp of death's embrace, Raditz's bravado shattered. I'm sorry, Nappa. I'm sorry for disappointing you again. Tears welled up in Raditz's eyes as he lay crumpled on the ground, his voice trembling with regret and anguish. I couldn't be the Saiyan warrior you wanted me to be. Nappa's deep baritone voice reverberated through the speaker, the words resonating loud enough for all to hear. Don't beat yourself over it, Raditz. You did all right. You've upheld your Saiyan honor by fighting till your last moment and taking down at least one enemy with you. It's a warrior's death, so rest easy now, kid. Upon hearing Nappa's words, a flicker of solace settled in Raditz's heart, knowing that his comrade and mentor Nappa had granted him this bittersweet moment of camaraderie. He slumped further, his gaze becoming increasingly unfocused as death loomed ever closer. On the contrary, Piccolo interjected vindicatively, his tone sharp and incisive. Son Goku won't be dead for too long. We have the Dragon Balls here and we can make a wish to revive him anytime. Damn it, damn it. Raditz's voice cracked as he screamed, the raw emotion behind his words resonating. Though Raditz no longer had the strength to move, his consciousness remained coherent enough to comprehend the statement and its implication. In the twilight moments of his life, Raditz's voice gave way to a wet, gurgling sound as he choked wetly, his breath growing ragged and labored. His struggles gradually ceased, and he fell quiet, the life finally fully drained from him. A pool of crimson spread from the grievous wound in his chest, mingling with the dirt on the ground, forming dark mud. Ajax twitched uncomfortably at the scene before him. He hadn't expected that. He had approached this conflict with a rational, calculated mindset, seeing Goku's death as a necessary objective and Raditz as nothing more than a villain to be overcome. Yet, the raw emotion, the very human vulnerability on display was far heavier than he had imagined. The cold, cruel finality of Raditz's demise had left its mark on his conscience and made him feel a sense of unease. To shake off the disturbing thoughts that had taken root in his mind, Ajax shook his head firmly, forcing himself to focus on the MASDR. He had achieved his second and third objectives without having to take direct action this time, the silver lining amidst this mess. There was no time to dwell on the past. What's done is what's done because there's far more to come. The scouter on Raditz's corpse unexpectedly came to life, Nappa's distinctive baritone cutting through the stillness. That's a shitty thing to say when he was still alive. It's what he deserved for getting in my way, Piccolo replied unapologetic and mercilessly. Nappa's commanding voice rang through the transmitter once more, commanding the attention of those present. Hey you! I want you to give Raditz a proper burial. He may have been a low-class warrior, but he is a Saiyan warrior nonetheless who had met his end honorably fulfilling his duty. As such, as a final act of respect, he deserves a proper burial. Piccolo picked up the scouter and replied defiantly. What if I refuse? Burial means a lot to us Saiyans, so if you don't, we're going to kill you all. Nappa's response was direct and unyielding, leaving no room for negotiation. Weren't you going to do that originally? Piccolo chuckled lowly, slightly amused at the response. On the contrary, our plan is to kill off every noteworthy male fighter, use these Dragon Balls you mentioned, destroy said Dragon Balls, and then utilize the elites of your native population to rebuild our Saiyan population. The scouter faithfully transmitted the reply. Piccolo let out a laugh. Do you know how negotiations work? That's not exactly a better alternative for us since we die either way. At this juncture, Vegeta, growing impatient with the direction the conversation was taking, broke his silence. His voice resonated through the scouter's speakers, the authority within demanding attention and respect. Enough. If you cannot even afford the barest semblance of respect for your fallen enemies, then there's no need to talk. You and your entire race will all be exterminated like vermin. Both Piccolo and Ajax felt an involuntary shiver run down their spines when Vegeta's voice reverberated through the scouter's speakers. It wasn't just the authority in his words, it was the unwavering certainty, a conviction so resolute that it left no room for doubt. It was as if what Vegeta declared was nothing short of fate itself, a proclamation that bore the weight of inevitability. Ajax wondered if this was what it felt like being on the receiving end of Monkey D. Luffy's proclamations about becoming the Pirate King. It was just one of those declarations that sent a chill through your very core. Piccolo responded firmly, his voice resolute and devoid of fear despite how deeply the encounter had shaken him. He will be given a simple burial. Very well. I will hold you to your word. As a courtesy, our ETA is approximately one of your planet's years. Vegeta replied coldly. Piccolo shifted. You sure telling us that is a good idea, Prince? It won't make a difference. And the transmission cuts off. Chapter 22, The Aftermath of Tragedy. Ajax winced in agony as Bulma painstakingly wrapped his mangled hand with clean bandages. 3 of his fingers on his left hand were gone, and a substantial portion of his palm had been obliterated along with it, leaving only his pinky and thumb intact. To those not in the know, this may seem like a stupid move, sacrificing parts of his hand like this, but Ajax knew that this would be worth it. The defeat of Raditz had set the stage for what lay ahead. The looming threat of the impending Saiyan invasion will prompt Cami to open the lookout for the Z fighters, allowing them to undergo rigorous training to prepare for the inevitable battle ahead. For Ajax, access to Cami's lookout meant access to Senzu beans, which translates into a guaranteed chance at complete recovery. Afterward, due to his body's ability, he'll gain a free resistance boost against both ki and piercing attacks due to tanking the special beam cannon. Sweet. In the meantime, though, ouch. Just then, Bulma tightened the bandage and Ajax released another involuntary hiss as fresh waves of pain shot through his injured hand. Bulma rose to her feet, her eyes still glistening with tears stemming from Goku's recent death. It must have been a shock for her, Ajax thinks, to arrive at the battlefield and be met with the cold corpse of her best friend lying on the ground. Ajax could only imagine the overwhelming emotions that she was dealing with at that very moment. Well, not that she got to see him for long, as Goku's body had disappeared shortly after his death. Ajax figured that Goku was learning about King Kai and preparing to traverse the Snake Way at this very moment, so while she might be crying now, it is for the best. You're all welcome, by the way, for making sure everyone doesn't die in a year. Ajax's eyes traveled beyond his bandaged hands, focusing on the small, unmarked grave they had quickly fashioned for Raditz. The process of creating it had been surprisingly swift and straightforward, as it was nothing more than a simple hole dug into the earth with the exertion of ki via a ki, but it served its purpose. Ajax's eyes trailed beyond the grave, taking in everyone else who stood around awkwardly. It's time to put on an act that would smooth over the upcoming developments when they occur. It was going to be a moment that required a careful, strategic approach and diplomacy, but he was prepared for it. Ajax forced himself to calm down. So, wat do we do now? Krillin eventually said, his voice filled with despondency. He was shaken by the events that had unfolded, his unfocused gaze lingering on Raditz's grave. We train, Piccolo declared, donning his signature turban and cloak once again with a casual wave of his hand. He met Krillin's gaze with steely determination. We train and we beat them when they inevitably return in a year. Silence reigned as Piccolo's declaration hung in the air, each person chewing them over and contemplating the gravity of their situation. They knew deep down that they had no other choice. It was a simple, brutal reality: become stronger or die. As the silence continued, Piccolo approached the slumbering figure of Gohan at an unhurried pace. The young boy lay asleep in Krillin's arms, exhausted and mentally drained from the traumatic events that had recently transpired. Krillin sensed Piccolo's approach and moved instinctively. With a swift, protective gesture, he extended his arm over Gohan, shielding the young Saiyan. His gaze locked onto Piccolo's with a clear warning, a silent message to keep his distance. In response to Krillin's protective stance, Piccolo cocked an eyebrow, his cool demeanor unwavering and unfazed. I'm taking the brat with me, Piccolo declared. I'm going to train him so that he can fight for us when the Saiyans come in a year. Krillin's anger flared, his protective instincts driving him to confront Piccolo head-on. No. I'm not letting you get your evil hands on Gohan, he snarled, his voice laced with a protective ferocity. Back off, Piccolo, or I'll make you. With a nonchalant roll of his eyes, Piccolo employed his telekinetic abilities and jerked Gohan away from Krillin with a mere thought. The young boy floated over to him rather quickly, and Piccolo deftly caught Gohan under one arm. He watched Krillin rise from his prior seated position in a burst of anger, determined to reclaim Gohan. Let it go, Krillin. Krillin's determined steps came to an abrupt halt as Ajax's voice, calm and measured, cut through the tension in the air. The others turned their attention to Ajax, who remained surprisingly poised and rational, despite the turmoil of the recent events. Piccolo is not going to kill Gohan. Remember what we discussed before? Vegeta and Nappa are also planetary threats, so Piccolo once again shares a common enemy with us. Ajax advised, his words measured and persuasive. Ajax, Krillin started to respond, but couldn't find the right words to convey his worries and doubts. Ajax, undeterred by Krillin's worry, directed his attention at Piccolo. He knows his next warning was unneeded, but Bulma and Krillin needed to hear it. Ajax's voice was firm as he voiced his thoughts. Piccolo, just promise that you won't abuse Gohan during your training. Because if you do, you of all people should know that there will be nothing in this world, or outside of it, that can shield you from Goku's sheer fury when he inevitably returns. I'll do what I need to train him, Piccolo replied blasely, unfazed by the warning. With that, Piccolo turned away from the group, preparing to depart. One more thing. Piccolo halted in his tracks and turned to face Ajax, his sharp, alien features inscrutable. His gaze fixed squarely on the young martial artist's dark eyes, waiting for his next words. You are currently the most powerful individual on this planet, Ajax began, meeting Piccolo's stare unflinchingly. As our heaviest hitter, we will need you the most when the Saiyans arrive, so don't forget to train yourself well. We're going to need you at your very best. At this, Piccolo gave Ajax a peculiar look. Ajax held his gaze steadily, a curious tension between them as they locked eyes. Their unwavering gaze continued until it stretched well past the point where awkwardness normally sets in. Finally, Piccolo spoke, his tone tinged with a mix of curiosity and bemusement. Odd, you're not afraid of me, are you? Ajax, however, remained silent, maintaining eye contact with the Namekian, his expression revealing nothing. I'm not entirely sure whether to be flattered by your trust in me or think that you're an idiot, Piccolo continued, a subtle dark grin forming on his lips. Because you definitely should be afraid of me. Ajax's expression remains unchanged. A beat passed, then two. Very soon, this continued indifference began to vex Piccolo, causing a faint frown to crease the Namekian's features. Fine, you don't need to remind me to train, Piccolo retorted, a tsk of annoyance escaping his mouth. The only reason why I'm even entertaining your words is because you helped me kill off Son Goku too. With a decisive twist, Piccolo turned away, his cape billowing behind him majestically. A cloud of dust kicked up as he gracefully took flight with Gohan in tow, ascending into the sky with a burst of energy. The boy's slumbering form was cradled securely under Piccolo's arm, the wind ruffling his hair as they lifted off. Ajax watched impassively, stoically tracking Piccolo's ascent as he disappeared into the horizon with Gohan. Needless to say, Ajax's confidence in Piccolo stemmed from his knowledge of the future. He knew that Piccolo would evolve into one of their most dependable allies, courtesy of the bond he formed with Gohan and one too many common enemies. For the canon to proceed smoothly, this event is crucial and necessary. That being said, Ajax was aware that from the perspective of everyone else at this moment in time, his faith in Piccolo seems somewhat unwarranted, considering Piccolo's current reputation as the Demon Lord. Ajax, what's your problem? Krillin yelled, his accusation sharp and pointed. You just stood there and let Gohan get kidnapped. And what exactly do you think we can do? Do you honestly believe you can take down Piccolo by force? Ajax responded with a measured tone, unflinching in the face of Krillin's accusation. Krillin abruptly shut his mouth at Ajax's curt statement, taken aback at those words. He cannot believe Ajax just said that so bluntly. While the truth in those words stung, Krillin just couldn't bring himself to accept giving up without trying. His frustration flared within him as he pondered the situation, and the more he did so, the angrier he became. Krillin couldn't help but question Ajax's role in the tragic outcome. Wasn't Goku's death, like Piccolo had said, partly Ajax's fault? Was it not true that Goku had restrained Raditz in that particular way based on Ajax's instructions? Heck, why was there a need for Goku to intervene and restrain Raditz at all when Ajax's vice-like grip on the Saiyans' tail appeared to have him paralyzed? Why did you have Goku do a full Nelson like that? He wouldn't have died if it weren't for your instructions. The heart-wrenching anguish in Krillin's voice cut through the tense atmosphere like a knife, exposing the raw pain that festered within. Ajax heaved a deep sigh. Here it is, the blowback for his actions. He knew he had to navigate this delicate situation with care as usual. Fortunately, he had taken the time to craft a response during his flight to the battlefield with Krillin. With composure almost unbefitting of the situation, he responded. And how could I have possibly known it was a piercing attack? Would anyone's first instinct to an attack that takes that long to charge be a piercing beam? Any other attack taking that long to charge time would be a key beam attack, where Goku would have been fine because Raditz would have been the one to take the brunt of the blast as his shield. Ajax raised his hand, showing the bloodied bandage that concealed his injury and waving it at Krillin. Look! Ajax exclaimed with as earnest of an expression he could make. I was pushing against Goku's back in preparation for a massive concussive beam. If I had known it was a piercing attack, do you really think this would have happened? The falsehood in Ajax's statement gave no indication of its true nature as he delivered these words in a skillful display of deception, presenting a masterfully fabricated narrative like the liar he is. In reality, Ajax was definitely 1000% aware that the special beam cannon was a piercing attack. Shame on any Dragon Ball fan who didn't. However, since no one other than him knew that detail at this moment, it allowed him to pin the blame on his ignorance with no one the wiser. Krillin's face froze while contorted with anger, making his features appear rather comical and exaggerated. He angrily kicked at the dirt, carving small grooves in the dirt. Shit, shit, shit. Krillin cursed vehemently. But as the logic of Ajax's words sank in, a sudden transformation overtook Krillin. His once fiery spirit seemed to wither away, and he seemed to deflate, his anger dissipating like air escaping from a balloon. His shoulders slumped, all the wind in his sails gone, leaving him looking defeated and emotionally drained. Throughout the heated exchange between Krillin and Ajax, Bulma had been silently observing the exchange, her keen eyes trained on the two of them. As the conversation wound down, Bulma couldn't contain the shiver that coursed down her spine at Ajax's unnerving calmness in the face of such a tragic event. Why are you so calm? She asked, her voice tinged with a hint of her unease. It's eerie how little of an emotional reaction you have to all of this. Isn't Goku your hero? Does he mean that little to you? Ajax hadn't anticipated this line of questioning, and he found himself momentarily at a loss for words as he considered how to respond. Ajax took a moment to gather his thoughts and craft his reply. What's Bulma getting at, and what does she want to hear? You're wrong if you think I'm not affected by all of this. I've just learned since my childhood to make plans and keep on moving forward instead of dwelling on the past. Ajax paused for a moment before continuing, and someone I respect also once advised me to not stress about the things right before me. Instead, I should take things step by step and deal with my challenges and opponents one by one as they come. Krillin, who had been listening, jerked in shock, recognizing the familiar words that Ajax had just spoken. His face contorted with incredulity and disbelief. Wasn't that his advice, just put in a different context? Ajax continued, and Goku is not gone for good. He'll be back thanks to the Dragon Balls, so we must stay rational for the Saiyan invasion ahead of us. Bulma, however, couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her since the conversation began. That's eerie too, how you always have a perfect answer for everything, she began, shaking her head. I understand making plans ahead of time, but there's no way you could have foreseen this. You're just so calm. It's like this is just routine, or like you're not experiencing the same emotions as the rest of us. It's like... Bulma paused, her hands moving and grasping at the air as she struggled to come up with the correct words to convey her thoughts. It feels like we're all dancing on the palm of your hands. I can't find the right words for this, but your reaction to all this is just unnatural and creepy. I honestly think something is very wrong with you. Ajax blinked. Shit, what the hell could he say to something like that? You are all still just characters to me? Despite having lived amongst them for 2 years, it's still difficult to separate the people before him from their fictional counterparts, especially when he has memories of the future. Ajax averted his gaze, unable to offer any counterargument or explanation, and instead chose silence as his response, as he had nothing to add. An incredibly uncomfortable and awkward silence enveloped the trio as they stood amidst the grim battlefield, each deep in thought, contemplating the weight of the events that occurred and the words spoken. Krillin, his voice drained of emotion, finally broke the quietude with a tired sigh. Let's go back. There's nothing more for us here, he uttered quietly, his words laced with resignation. Wordlessly, the three of them shuffled their way to the awaiting jet. The aircraft's engines roared to life shortly after they boarded, and they soared away from the battlefield that had so irrevocably altered the fate of Earth. Chapter 23 *. So, we may die in a year. The clash of energy and the earth-shaking explosions from the great battle between Raditz, Goku, and Piccolo had not gone unnoticed by the world at large. Though there was no direct footage nor official confirmation, the news of a supposed fierce confrontation had rapidly spread, drawing both speculation and the attention of people around the world. Amid the uncertainty, various rumors and theories emerged. Some believed that the notorious Piccolo Daimao had returned to wreak havoc upon the world once more, while others speculated that it might be the result of weapon testing gone horribly wrong. But those who were genuinely in the know knew just how alarming a clash of this magnitude truly was. On a serene island east of the continent, a gentle sea breeze rustled through the swaying palm trees, and the rhythmic waves lapped against the sandy shore. On the pristine beach of the Cami house, Tien Shinhan, Kairatsu, and Yamcha had gathered. The trio stood before Master Roshi, who, with a somber expression, was providing them with a detailed rundown of the situation. Of the three, Yamcha's reactions were the most pronounced. His face grew progressively paler, shifting to sheer horror as the increasingly terrible news unfolded before him. Nearby, Tien Shinhan shifted his weight to one foot, his arms crossed over his chest. His typically stoic expression now marred with a deep furrow in his brows, and his 3 eyes held a silent intensity as he listened to the grim account of the events. Beside him, Kairatsu floated gently in the air, his small face displayed a rare trace of worry. This battle is going to be intense, Tien Shinhan finally remarked. Goku is in for a tough fight and we should be ready to assist if need be. Yamcha, his hands clenched in his pockets, nodded his agreement. You're right, man, but I don't think we'll be able to make it there on time. Let's just hope Piccolo and Goku can hold him off for now, Kairatsu added as a compromise, hovering next to Tien. The significance of this battle was not lost on them, and they could only hope for a victory against an opponent so fierce that it required Goku and Piccolo to work together. The distinct sound of a jet engine soon roared through the air, drawing the attention of everyone present at Cami House. All eyes turned toward the approaching aircraft, hope coursing through them. The unspoken thought lingered in their minds collectively, It certainly boded well if the aircraft was returning. As Bulma, Krillin, and Ajax touched down on the beach in the Capsule Corporation jet, they were met with a chaotic scene. Bodies and voices swarmed around them, and a cacophony of questions and clamors for information filled the air. Krillin stood with drooping shoulders, feeling the weight of the world on his back as he acquiesced and began to recount the harrowing tale of the battle that had unfolded. With a somber voice, he detailed the arrival of the Saiyan Raditz, the desperate struggle against him, Goku's death, Gohan's kidnapping, and the arrival of even more powerful Saiyans in a year. After the morbid tale was told, a heavy silence descended upon those gathered. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over them, casting a shadow of uncertainty. The world had not only lost its champion but also faced the looming threat of destruction within a year, with worse enemies still on the horizon. The news of Goku's death and the impending threat of the Saiyans weighed heavily on everyone's minds, and each person coped with the information in their own way. Kairatsu gasped and raised a hand to his mouth. Tien's scowl deepened, his third eye narrowing as he digested the circumstances. Yamcha stood nearby, his teeth gritted and his fists clenched, his emotions churning beneath the surface. Bulma, her eyes glistening with tears, turned away, a clear intent to be alone. She walked away from the group, seeking solitude and a moment of quiet to sort out her thoughts and emotions. Her departure, however, did not go unnoticed by Yamcha, who watched her retreating form with concern. He decided to follow her, intending to speak to her alone with a glint of determination in his posture. Krillin, who understood his friend rather well, predicted Yamcha's intent and called out to him. "Bro, you should just leave it. It's not a good time," Krillin advised, recognizing that it wasn't the best moment for a relationship talk. The recent events were still fresh, and emotions were running high. Yamcha came to a halt, his steps arrested by Krillin's words. He glanced back, his expression resolute. "Probably, but I have to fix it," he replied, before resuming his steps and following Bulma to the rear of the Kame house. Meanwhile, Tien Shinhan took the initiative to break the ice with his new acquaintance, stepping forward and extending a hand in greeting toward Ajax. "So, you're Ajax, huh? First time meeting you. I'm Tien Shinhan. And this is Kairatsu," Tien stated, tilting his head briefly to gesture at the small figure floating beside him. "Nice to meet you," Kairatsu chimed in with a warm nod, extending a friendly greeting to Ajax when he was introduced. Ajax accepted Tien's extended hand with a firm handshake and nodded at Kairatsu, returning their greetings. He studied Tien, the martial artist he had considered to be his most optimal mentor before Master Roshi took him under his wing. A slightly puzzled expression suddenly appeared on Ajax's face when something came to mind. "Master Roshi informed us about you, the new student he had taken on, while we were here." Tien Shinhan explained, clearing the source of Ajax's confusion before he had the chance to voice his question. Ajax's expression shifted from confusion to one of understanding. "So, Master Roshi began after the introductions concluded, his tone making it very clear that he was broaching a subject even more dire than what had just occurred. Who wants the honor of delivering the news to Chi-Chi?" All conversation instantly ceased at those words, each person's expression souring in dread at the task. That was nothing more than committing suicide with a few extra steps, and none of them wanted anything to do with it. As they deliberated on their excuses in silence, a tumultuous argument abruptly erupted from the back of the house, temporarily overpowering the soothing sounds of the ocean waves. Bulma's words reverberated through the air, punctuated by frustration and anger. "I don't care about your apologies. What part of 'I need time and space' do you not understand?" The argument continued, but the voices became increasingly indistinct, yet the unmistakable tension in the air left no doubt that things were not going well for the couple. "I'm not an appropriate choice," Tien expressed his reasoning, determined to not take part in this. His voice was unwavering as he made his decision clear. "Kairatsu, and I don't know her all that well." Floating beside him, Kairatsu nodded his head vigorously in agreement. "I'm too old for stuff like that," Master Roshi added immediately after, his stature trembling as he pretended his cane could barely support his weight. Ajax, determined not to be the last one out, began to offer his own excuse, "I'm injured." But before he could complete his sentence, Krillin interjected with his recommendation. "Ajax should do it." Ajax's head whipped in Krillin's direction so fast that he almost felt his adaptation ability kick in. Ajax's mouth dropped open in a look of affronted shock as his friend and senpai for over 2 years unhesitatingly threw him under the bus. The injustice of it all. Krillin, however, stood by his proposal, unfazed by Ajax's accusatory glare. To Ajax's dismay, Krillin's declaration was rapidly met with approving nods from those around him. "That's a good idea. Chi-Chi might go easy on Ajax due to his age, and he's also blessed by Shinron, so he won't die from the experience, Master Roshi, with a wry twinkle in his eye, added his 2 cents while trying to act wise by thoughtfully stroking his beard. You might even gain quite a significant defense boost afterward. Do you think angry housewife and slippers count as 1 or 2 injury categories? On the opposite side of those gathered, Tien and Kairatsu exchanged perplexed glances, confused due to not knowing the context of Ajax's abilities. Ajax, unlike them, knew exactly what the quip was poking fun of, and he swiveled around to direct a baleful look at Master Roshi. I didn't agree to shit. This is child abuse. Language. Krillin chided with a mischievous glint in his eye. And you're outvoted 4-1, so good luck, Ajax. F***CKU. Ajax's glare could melt steel. Krillin, no longer able to contain his amusement, popped a schadenfreude smile and presented 2 thumbs up, thoroughly enjoying the predicament he had engineered for Ajax. So, sue him, he's still feeling a little salty at Ajax's role in Goku's death, even if he knew it wasn't really Ajax's fault. So, it's agreed that Ajax will tell Chi-Chi the news, Tien interjected with a nod of approval, conveniently ignoring any protests as the others laughed at Ajax's screeches of outrage. It seems like the decision has been finalized. With that matter settled, Tien redirected the conversation toward more pressing matters. Let's move on to more serious topics then, he suggested, capturing everyone's attention. We should talk about plans for the Saiyan invasion. This Raditz was far stronger than Goku or Piccolo, and suddenly in a year, we'll be facing even stronger enemies. That's daunting. Krillin nodded his agreement and leaned forward, a hand on his chin. We've been training all our lives, and suddenly we're being asked to achieve power multiple times beyond our current level in just a year. How in the world can we do that? Silence reigned once more as the group huddled together, mulling over their predicament. The task at hand was so colossal that it left them all feeling somewhat lost, desperately searching for a glimmer of a viable plan. Ajax eyed the troubled looks on everyone's faces, comparatively relaxed. He'll point them in the right direction if things don't start resolving themselves. And just then, an ancient and mystical voice suddenly resounded in their minds. Its mental presence was so commanding that it instantly captured the attention of every member of the group. Well, I think I can help with that. Stern. DBA Corner, Key Cancelling and Key Force Fields. This DBA Corner is a continuation, or part 2, of the key sections prior. This time, I will discuss 2 topics, Key Cancelling and Key Force Fields. This is going to be a long one, so let's dive right in. Key cancelling is exactly what it sounds like. When 2 beams of ki collide, the energies within the 2 beams nullify each other at the point of contact, as if they have inverse wavelengths. For scientifically inclined readers, it is essentially destructive interference. This is also the reason why cataclysmic explosions rarely happen when 2 planet-busting attacks clash, instead entering the familiar beam struggle that we all know and love. The beam with more energy, in other words, the stronger one, gradually gains the upper hand, pushing back the weaker beam because not all of its energy is negated. Pretty simple, right? The next topic is key force fields. Please note that I'm not referring to the barrier technique Android 17 uses, as that is a different concept altogether. In prior DBA corners, I briefly explained how ki naturally radiates outward from an individual's body at a set base rate. The ki that was emitted doesn't just dissipate into the surroundings. Instead, it naturally coalesces to form a protective force field of sorts that envelopes the fighter's body, roughly at the current PL of the fighter. This is a constant value for individuals who without ki control. An important note to consider is that if a fighter depletes their ki reserves, their ability to maintain the ki force field is compromised. In this state, they become susceptible to damage from attacks that they would have otherwise been unfazed by. The ki force field is composed entirely of ki, so when this protective layer intercepts an attack made of ki, destructive interference/ki cancelling will occur. In simpler terms, it reduces the force within the incoming attack. This is why Vegeta's attacks were capable of eliminating Nappa, but did absolutely nothing to Frieza, even when Frieza was just standing there. The sheer difference between Frieza's force field and Vegeta's attack nullified Vegeta's attacks entirely. Ever wondered why someone can catch a ki beam with their hands in one instance, yet at other times be swallowed by it? This is why. Ki force field does not cancel out PL at a 1-to-1 ratio. When 2 fighters with similar PL attack each other, they will still inflict damage on each other, just to a slightly lesser degree. Think of it as the force field not having sufficient time to completely neutralize the incoming energy before the attack makes contact. The greater the disparity in PL between the 2 fighters, the more effective the ki force field is at reducing the damage. As mentioned before, if one is overwhelmingly stronger, the enemy's strongest attack does as much damage as a feather dropping on their face. At that point, you can imagine the force field functioning like Gojo Satoru's infinity, just instead of infinity, it's a big-ass number. The ki force field, while highly effective at mitigating ki-based attacks, has a reduced efficiency when it comes to absorbing physical force. The higher your PL, the greater the amount of physical force your force field can absorb. That being said, purely physical matter exerting force is more likely to surpass the ki force field's protective effects, as it isn't hindered by the ki cancelling effect. As a result, even characters with incredibly high PLs can still be hurt by physical force. This is why SSG Goku was still taking damage when Broly slammed Goku's face through a glacier. Taking an enemy punch, however, is a different matter. When an opponent attacks physically, it's important to remember that their body inherently possesses its own ki and force field, which means the ki cancelling effect takes place since they impact your own ki force field. This reduces the force from enemy physical attacks, making them significantly weaker than they might initially appear before contact. If your PL is significantly higher than your opponent's, you can nearly completely nullify enemy physical attacks. Instances of this happen in nearly every battle in DB with transformations. For instance, during Vegeta v. Broly in the DBS movie, base form Broly's physical attacks immediately lost effectiveness when Vegeta transformed into SS. At the same time, SS Vegeta's attacks seemed to become more potent. The same happened when Broly used his legendary SS form, and SSG Vegeta's attacks became completely ineffective. Another example is the iconic scene where SS Goku attacks Super Android 13 and essentially nothing happens, but manages to punch straight through Super Android 13 after getting a power-up. Now, what if we were to consider the opposite extreme and minimize the force field to nearly nothing? In peacetime, Z fighters suppress their ki to near zero levels to prevent inadvertent destruction of their surroundings or harm to people in their vicinity. When they do this, the minimal ki force field leaves them vulnerable to even the most normal of things. This is why a sleeping SS Goku was hurt when Krillin threw a small rock at him right before the Cell Games. It's also the reason why Police Officer Krillin can still be hurt from being shot. In summary, in DBA, a character's physical body is not as strong as you might think. The reason why someone can withstand planet-busting beam blasts and physical attacks is not that they're really that tough physically, but because their ki force field cancelled a significant portion of the energy or power behind an attack through ki cancelling. Reminder that these force fields are less effective against ki-less physical forces, so they still get hurt, just slightly less, if they were subjected to severe physical impacts against objects. Chapter 24, By the way Chi-Chi, your husband is dead. A day later. Ajax paced in unease, restlessly wringing his hands before him in an attempt to release his nervous energy. He moved his hands with a cautious rhythm, mindful not to inadvertently worsen the injury from the special beam cannon. He cast a quick glance at the wound, detachedly noting that spots of red were once again visible through the outer layers of his bandage. Darn it, he must have jostled it on the way here. The silver lining of this situation was that the injury no longer bothered him. The once agonizing pain had dissipated to a mere annoying throbbing within an hour of the injury thanks to his adaptation. Now, it had progressed to a state of cool nothingness, something he is very appreciative of. It is a fantastic perk, Ajax thinks, to be shielded from prolonged physical discomfort. No more sweating through blankets for him. However, reality is imperfect. With resignation, Ajax had to admit that the wound had shown minimal healing progress, which wasn't unexpected, given that only a single day had passed since the injury occurred. Ajax turned around, pacing backward along the same path. Since the impromptu telepathic message from Cami the day before, the Z fighters had finally glimpsed a ray of hope. Cami had requested them to gather at Corin's tower in 2 days' time, where their training would commence in preparation for the impending Saiyan invasion. In other words, tomorrow, since Cami said that yesterday. This aligned with Ajax's recollection of canon, as the same sequence of events had occurred there as well. However, what Ajax didn't anticipate was getting the responsibility of delivering the bad news to Chi-Chi unceremoniously dumped on him. He feels irked just thinking about it. Freaking Krillin and his bold-ass head, throwing me under the bus like this. Ajax scowled, muttering under his breath. Ajax, who had been pacing in front of Goku's house, stopped as his eyes focused on the structure. A round, modest little thing slightly upshore of a gentle river and flanked by a warehouse that likely stashed food for Goku's black hole of a stomach. The house looks like Krillin's bald head, Ajax thought vindicatively. Ajax took a deep breath. It was time to face the music. Steeling himself for what lay ahead, he rapped his knuckles against the door. To his surprise, the door swung open swiftly before he could knock a third time. From the doorway, Chi-Chi greeted him with a welcoming smile. Ajax met her gaze and offered a polite nod. Hello, Mrs. Chi-Chi. Can we talk for a moment? Chi-Chi tilted her head, smiling warmly. Why, of course. I've been waiting for you to stop pacing and come in. I can sense Ki too, you know. Oh. Ajax stuttered, a small blush of embarrassment tinting his cheeks as the mortification of being caught red-handed washed over him. You must be young Ajax? Chi-Chi continued, her amused smile widening a tad at Ajax's embarrassment. You know who I am. Yes. My Goku talks about you sometimes. He was so very proud of himself when he learned he was your hero and so very excited for your graduation ceremony. Chi-Chi chuckled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Oh shit, now Ajax feels guilty for plotting to have him killed. Oh, where are my manners? Come on in. Chi-Chi graciously stepped back, inviting Ajax to enter with a welcoming gesture. I have already prepared some tea and snacks, got to make a good first impression. She gave Ajax a small conspiratorial wink. Feeling a bit out of his element, Ajax responded with an awkward look, uncertain about how to broach the awful news delicately. He had been expecting the matter to be relatively straightforward, drop the news, perhaps offer some well-meaning platitudes, and be promptly on his merry way. He hadn't expected to be invited in for tea of all things. Noticing Ajax's discomfort, Chi-Chi furrowed her brows, a flicker of confusion crossing her eyes as she attempted to identify the cause of his unease. As Ajax continued to hesitate at the doorway, Chi-Chi's keen eyes zeroed in on the bloody bandages wrapped around Ajax's hand. In a heartbeat, her eyes widened in shock and the once jovial expression slipped from her face. Oh dear. What happened to your hand? Come, let me take a look. Chi-Chi said as she gestured more fervently towards a nearby table. When Ajax still hesitated, Chi-Chi took matters into her own hands. She walked over and gently but assertively dragged Ajax inside by the sleeve of his shirt before giving him a light push toward a chair. We can't let your injuries go untreated. Here, sit down and let me help you. Tea can wait. Ajax hesitated briefly before deciding to pull out the chair before him, gingerly taking a seat at the dining table. It's just a small injury for me, nothing to be worried about, Ajax muttered. Chi-Chi, having plentiful experience dealing with comments of such nature, was not convinced. She fixed Ajax with a stern, motherly look, a look universally meaning cut the bullshit. Ajax flashed an awkward smile as Chi-Chi went about retrieving medical supplies from the nearby cabinet, returning in no time and cradling a med kit to her chest. Ajax involuntarily jerked in his seat at the sight of the briefcase-sized med kit, caught off guard at the sheer size of the thing. The atmosphere shifted as Chi-Chi sat down, suddenly all business as she opened the formidable med kit. Show me your hand, dear. Ajax extended his hand across the table, a silent invitation for Chi-Chi to inspect the wounds. She delicately began the process of unwrapping the bandages, revealing the gruesome wound that had just started to heal. My God! You're hurt so badly. Who did this? Did Goku do this? Chi-Chi huffed as she continued to work on the injury. And I presume he's too scared to come back. Well, he better not, because I'll kill him. Caught up in Chi-Chi's rhythm, Ajax let her tend to his hand as she saw fit. It didn't matter to him either way, as it didn't really bother him anymore. Ajax watched as Chi-Chi fussed over the injury with a practiced hand, deftly changing the bandages. Her actions betrayed her wealth of experience, showcasing a level of expertise that a housewife normally would not have. She must have done this for Goku countless times, Ajax thought. As the silence dragged on, Ajax steeled himself for what was about to come. Now is as good of a time as any to break the news, he supposes. So, about what happened? Ajax started broaching the subject. Chi-Chi tilted her head, indicating that she was listening, all the while wordlessly working on his bandages. I just want you to know that I'm not the bearer of good news. Ajax finished. I know. Your body language and wound said as much. Goku doesn't make mistakes this severe during training. Chi-Chi paused briefly, contemplating the implications. It must be pretty bad if they're sending you a child to break the news. Goku is dead. The movement of Chi-Chi's hands suddenly ceased as her breath hitched. After a deep, shuddering breath, she composed herself and resumed bandaging Ajax's wounds. However, her hands now trembled as the news of her husband's death settled down on her shoulders. Was it Piccolo? Ajax hesitated for a moment before responding. He has no intentions of willingly telling her about his involvement in Goku's death. After all, self-preservation took precedence, and Ajax wasn't keen on dying today, thank you very much. Only technically. It was actually an alien. This alien was so overwhelmingly powerful that Goku had no choice but to join forces with Piccolo. Even with their combined efforts, they only won by the skin of their teeth. In the end, Goku had to sacrifice himself to give Piccolo the opportunity to deliver a fatal shot on the enemy. Chi-Chi tied the final knot on Ajax's hand. And Gohan. Piccolo decided to train him, preparing Gohan to defend himself when two of the alien's comrades arrive in a year. Ajax explained, carefully choosing his words. Chi-Chi's response was swift and incisive. That's an interesting way of saying he was kidnapped, she remarked curtly, fixing Ajax with a penetrating stare, conveying a mother's protective instinct through the intensity of her gaze. Who was there when Gohan was taken? Krillin, Bulma, and myself. Oh, and of course Piccolo, Ajax answered truthfully. He felt a bead of sweat slide down his neck from the abrupt shift in Chi-Chi's tone and the atmosphere at large, the interaction resembling less of a conversation and more like an interrogation. You were already injured then? From the same attack that killed the alien. Chi-Chi tilted her head. Did Krillin do anything to prevent the kidnapping? Ajax paused, hesitating. What's the best play here for him, lie or honesty? After a moment, he took a deep breath, decision made. I persuaded him not to do anything. The room immediately plunged into an icy stillness, enveloped by a bone-chilling silence amplified by Chi-Chi's expression that can only be described as abyssally cold. Why? She demanded frostily, the single word sharp enough to draw blood. Because Krillin and I were too weak to make a difference against Piccolo. Ajax began, carefully weaving lies and truth together. I also believed that by allowing Piccolo to train him, we're giving him a chance to survive. Even if Piccolo were to leave Gohan alone, Gohan would still die a year from now if we fail to contain the threat. Besides, Goku is watching from the other side, so if Piccolo does anything, we both know nothing can save him from Goku's wrath. And you're absolutely certain that Gohan will make all the difference in the upcoming fight? In fact, Ajax knows Gohan would. Bolstered by his memories of canon, Ajax nodded with confidence stemming from foreknowledge. Chi-Chi's face remained cold, her unblinking eyes an icy void as it pierced Ajax, causing him to shift uncomfortably. The sheer force of the stare felt like an oppressive weight, and the pressure she exuded was so intense that the air itself felt thick. It felt as if the very room was tightening around him as he sat there, feeling the seconds stretch into an eternity. Ajax swallowed as he felt the slight urge to puke. Damn, is this what Conqueror's hockey feels like? They were smart to send you. Your age is your shield. Chi-Chi replied dispassionately, her eyes penetrating deep into his soul. I'm going to say this once and once only. As the consequence of your beliefs and actions that directly resulted in my Gohan's kidnapping, when the next confrontation happens in a year, I want you to protect him with your life. Ajax swallowed nervously again and opened his mouth to speak, but Chi-Chi cut him off. No. Juve misunderstood. I didn't say try your best, so spare me your platitudes. Chi-Chi's eyes did not waver from Ajax's. I'll say it again. I want you to keep Gohan safe. At all costs. Even if you have to die. I won't listen to your excuses, and I don't care what happens a year from now. If you come back here alive and Gohan is dead, I will make sure that the only thing Shenron can say when he tries to revive you is this wish is beyond my power. Am I clear? Ajax gulped and nodded. Clear. Ajax nodded more vigorously at those threatening words. He now perfectly understands why Chi-Chi possesses such a fearsome reputation despite her unimpressive strength. Course, goddamn. Suddenly, as if flipping a switch, Chi-Chi's countenance transformed from cold to radiant, a bright smile lighting up her face as if all was right in the world. Rising from her seat with fluid grace, she returned the humongous med kit to its original place in the cabinet. Swiftly returning to Ajax, Chi-Chi carried a tray adorned with a teapot and cups, each filled with fragrant tea. She set the tray down on the table as if nothing unusual had transpired, smoothly resuming the role of a hospitable host with an eerie ease. Her sudden shift in emotion had only made the situation even creepier. Tea, dear, she offered, her smile retaining its brightness. Ajax reluctantly accepted the offered cup and brought it to his lips, taking a cautious sip of the tea. Chrysanthemum. Although he can't tell if poison is present, his ability means that he can adapt to it. Probably. Actually, wouldn't that be a hilarious way for him to go out? Imagine this, cause of death, poisoned by Chi-Chi. Why didn't Krillin come with you? Chi-Chi inquired after taking a sip of tea herself. Here, Ajax found himself standing at yet another crossroads, confronted with a choice that could have potential repercussions. for Krillin. In all honesty, he should just take one for the team. He's already waist-deep in the lioness's den and already had his life threatened. If he just claimed he volunteered to come, Krillin would get off scot-free. If he were to consider that Krillin is his senpai, who is he kidding? He's definitely throwing Krillin under the bus. Misery loves company and all that, and today, his name is Misery. He was too scared to come with. Oh, is that so? How cute. Chi-Chi giggled into her hand gracefully, reminiscent of a certain rich girl from Ajax's past life. He really thinks that that will keep him safe from me. A slight shudder ran through Ajax, slightly disturbed as he observed Chi-Chi daintily holding her teacup and laughing joyfully, and somewhat maniacally, all the while silently plotting Krillin's death. A psychopath. What was that, dear? Nothing, ma'am. Ajax hurriedly responded. That's it for today. He's hit the limit of what he can handle. It was clear to him that he should have made his exit, like yesterday, and come back never. Kudos to Goku for dealing with her every day, but he's got to dash before he actually gets himself killed. I have to go, ma'am. Master Korin is expecting me, and I can't keep him waiting for too long. Chi-Chi acknowledged his words with a nod, her smile persisting as though she found amusement in the unfolding events. Why, of course. Please stay safe on your journey there, and don't forget the promise you made to me. Her words might have sounded sweet and caring, but Ajax knew better. She wasn't genuinely inquiring about his safety at all. I won't forget, Ajax mumbled as he scrambled like a chipmunk with its butt on fire, making a beeline for the door while attempting to not appear hurried. He failed miserably. Once safely beyond the doorway of that death trap of a house, Ajax managed to offer a swift wave in farewell before ascending into the air and booking it as swiftly as he could, breathing a sigh of relief as he did so. Even as the distance between him and Chi-Chi grew, he could feel the unsettling feeling of Chi-Chi's penetrating stare burning into his back. Yeah, he thinks Gohan deserves his own line in the master plan now. As Ajax soared through the sky, his thoughts shifted to a different matter, the looming threat of Vegeta and Nappa on the horizon. With the Raditz ordeal now resolved, the intricate web of the master plan demanded he focus on a new set of objectives. As events progressed into the canon's next chapter, the resources he now has at his disposal expanded significantly. No more excuses, this time, he has to be ready for Nappa and Vegeta. In the meantime, though, Ajax supposes nothing is stopping him from getting to Korin's tower a bit early. It's not because he wanted to put as much physical distance between him and Chi-Chi or anything. Definitely not. Chapter 25. Why You Shouldn't Drink the Ultra-Divine Water, a Thesis. Half an hour later. Climbing Korin's tower is a breeze when you can just fly, Ajax thought, a bemused smirk pulling on his lips as he ascended the vaunted tower. As he sped up, the rustic carvings on the structure began to pass by him in a blur, much too fast to be discerned, causing his smirk to grow even wider at his speed. Get on my level, noobs. Ajax's upbeat mood, however, deflated like a sad balloon when he reached the pinnacle of the legendary tower. Apparently, Ajax was still too much of a goody-two-shoes despite not following Cami's instructions, because even though he had arrived a full day ahead of schedule, he was still somehow the last one there. Even freaking Yajirobe of all people had beaten him to the punch. With a gentle tap, Ajax landed on the stone floor of Korin's tower, turning to face the 4 Z fighters, plus Yajirobe, with a deadpan expression. He cannot believe these people. And to think that if it weren't for Chi-Chi, he would have arrived another day later. So, I'm the last one to get here? A sheepish look overcame every Z fighter's face as they collectively exchanged guilty glances while awkwardly shifting their gazes. Ajax raised an unimpressed eyebrow at the sight despite knowing he was guilty of the same. Krillin stepped forth, an embarrassed grin on his face. Can you blame us? We were just too excited. Thank God you're here though, we were beginning to feel guilty about not following instructions, but it seems like we're all on the same page. Krillin admitted sheepishly as he continued to step forward towards Ajax. By the way, how did things go with Chi-Chi? What do you think, senpai? Ajax hissed, his tone dripping with sarcasm as he shot Krillin a scathing glare full of irritation. Hee, well, at least you're alive. Can't say the same for myself if I had gone in your place. Krillin chuckled nervously, feeling just a tad awkward at throwing his kohai to the wolves. Or rather, wolf. Oh, by the way, Chi-Chi wants to talk to you too, Ajax mentioned casually, watching with vindicated satisfaction as the color instantly drained from Krillin. The tentative, nervous smile that had lingered on Krillin's face earlier vanished, leaving him looking as though someone had sucked the very life out of him. From the periphery of his vision, Ajax's attention was snagged by the sight of a short white cat emerging from a nearby room wielding a wooden cane taller than itself. There was no mistaking it. This had to be Corin. Leaving Krillin to panic by himself in peace, Ajax strode forward and gave a brief but respectful bow to the martial artist master. Master Corin, pleased to make your acquaintance. Extending his cane, Corin lightly tapped the end of it against Ajax's head. You're Ajax. Ajax affirmed with a nod, acknowledging his identity. At the confirmation, Corin eyed Ajax with a mix of disappointment and resignation. I was holding out hope that you'd arrive tomorrow as requested, but I see now that my optimism was held in vain. Corin sighed, clearly disappointed by Ajax's failure to follow instructions, much like the others. His piece said, Corin retrieved a senzu bean from somewhere in his fur and flicked it over to Ajax. Here. For your hand. Ajax managed to catch the bean with ease, as it wasn't exactly a difficult throw. His eyes focused on the bean in his hand, attempting to examine it more closely. It's literally just a bean, Ajax thought to himself, amused at how utterly ordinary it was. Out of curiosity, how many of these do you have, Master Corin? Ajax inquired casually. He needed to secure as many of these as possible for the upcoming events, so Corin's answer would be crucial, as it would dictate his subsequent strategy. Ah, these healing ones? It's a new variant I accidentally developed right before the fiasco with Piccolo Daimao, so very, very little, Corin explained patiently. Leaning on his cane, he continued, the regular ones that fill you up for 10 days, on the other hand, I have barrels and barrels of. Wait, what the shit? Ajax instinctively recoiled, his nose and brow wrinkling as if someone had blasted a particularly nasty fart in his face. What in the world is happening? He's absolutely certain there weren't any variations of senzu beans in the canon. Is he in some alternate universe? If this is different, what else is different? Ajax felt himself tense at the implication. However, Ajax decided to set that thought aside for the time being. Although the current situation implies that senzu beans will be scarce, mirroring the canon, it's also a matter he can deal with later. Right now, his immediate priority is to heal his hand. Ajax popped the bean in his mouth, offering Corin one final nod in thanks before biting down on the senzu bean. As he did so, Ajax felt an exhilarating surge of energy coursing through his hand. He watched in fascination as his hand regenerated, beginning from the bone and progressing through layers of muscle. In no time, his hand was fully healed. Following the restoration of his hand, the surge of energy persisted, unabatedly rushing through his entire body, filling his ki reserves to their maximum capacity. It was a sensation of unparalleled satisfaction, as if every joint in his body had been simultaneously cracked, or every knot in his muscles loosening all at once. Ajax let out a slow, deep breath through his nose, savoring the afterglow. Goddamn, that was undeniably a perfect 10/10. That being said, the flavor of the bean left much to be desired. It tasted of raw beans mixed with low-quality fish gone slightly bad. 3/10, did not enjoy, would not recommend. Yeah, the first time is always a rush, Master Corin acknowledged Ajax's reaction with a nod, a knowing gleam in his feline eyes. Shortly, he turned his attention to the rest of the assembled Z fighters, addressing them. I'll let Cami know of the situation here. He should give you all the permission to go to the lookout soon. Ajax, having patiently waited for Corin to finish his statement, seized the opportunity to make another request. Master Corin. Ajax's voice cut through the gathering, prompting the wise feline to pivot back towards him. Can I challenge the divine water? Oh sure. You have to catch me and I'll... Not that one, Master Corin. The other one. The ultra-divine water. Or God water. Whatever it's called. Corin paused at the statement, his feline features freezing in a moment of contemplation. As the rather bold request settled in, Corin's demeanor shifted drastically, his narrow eyes, already squinted even further, and the mischievous gleam within them disappeared, replaced by a smoldering intensity. With a deliberate motion, Corin moved his staff upright, shedding his whimsical aura and transforming into a figure of wisdom and imposing authority. I presume Goku told you about it, Corin began, leveling an assessing look at Ajax and appraising the young warrior. I hope you are aware that it is an incredible poison. No one other than Goku survived drinking it, and apparently, as we all recently learned, he's not even human. The success rate for a human remains at 0. The Z fighters had, of course, caught wind of the impending challenge, attuned to the conversation as they were. In the moment of silence that lingered in the air after Corin's rather ominous statement, Yajirobe spectacularly blew his lid, the recollection of Goku's agonizing experience with the ultra-divine water vividly etched in his memory. He screamed his vehement objection through the empty space of Corin's tower. No. Don't do it. Even Goku barely survived, and he screamed in pain for like 6 hours. "You'll die for sure." Ignoring the uproar from behind him, Ajax asked Corinne one simple question that cut through the commotion instantly. "Does it kill you immediately?" Corinne shakes his head. "No. Those who drank it suffered for a long time before dying." "What, you a masochist or something? What's your point?" "My point is, it's something that the challenger must adapt to and overcome for them to reap the benefits. Am I right, Master Corinne?" Ajax's satisfied smirk grew wider as he spoke. "Yeah. Don't you know? Adapting and overcoming are my specialty," Ajax declared with self-assured confidence as his smirk stretched from cheek to cheek. "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Literally." Amongst the Z fighters, Krillin's expression morphed into one of stunned realization, his mouth dropping open, resembling a Venus flytrap ready to catch flies. He looked like someone who just had an epiphany of a lifetime. Corinne's feline features scrunched in confusion at Ajax's statement. He knows he's missing some important context, that much was clear from Krillin's reaction. "I don't know what you mean, but since it sounds like you intend to proceed, I'll let you take a hack at it, only because the Saiyans are coming, mind you." With measured steps, Corinne waddled off to his room, disappearing briefly before re-emerging with a small tray upon which rested an ornamental teapot and a single plain teacup. Corinne poured the contents of the teapot, a viscous purple liquid, into the cup. After the task was completed, he held out the mostly full cup towards Ajax, inviting him to drink. With both hands, Ajax cautiously accepted the teacup from Corinne, seizing the opportunity to peer into its purple depths. It looked remarkably like grape juice, except it smelled sour, if that even made sense. The sight of it also scared him slightly, because despite the cup's modest size, he couldn't see the bottom, as the liquid within was so murky that it created the illusion of being endless. Ajax took a deep breath, feeling nervous at the impending experience. It can't be worse than a crucio, right? Though, if he were to be honest, he can't exactly say those are walks in the park either, nor can he claim that he had experienced one. Okay, that's enough stalling. Here goes nothing. An anticipated hush enveloped the gathered Z fighters as they watched Ajax bring the teacup to his lips. With a resolute exhale, Ajax chugged the ultra-divine water in a single mouthful, downing it like a seasoned drinker tossing back a shot. Wah! Warm and bitter. That was all Ajax managed to say before his world shattered into countless pieces as an unimaginable torrent of pain surged through him. It was a mind-breaking, indescribable agony, a cacophony of pure suffering that drowned out any thought or resolve he had. Every fiber of his being screamed in protest as if he were being consumed by an inferno, the pain lighting every nerve on fire as if he was burning alive inside out. His stomach convulsed, feeling like a xenomorph was tearing at him from within. His muscles locked up, cramping and contorting while his head felt as if it was about to split open. Ajax collapsed to the ground on his back, mouth open in a soundless scream as his back arched involuntarily. Then, the silence shattered as Ajax's agony found its voice. He screamed, his throat raw, the sound ripping from his vocal cords, primal and guttural. Adapt body. Adapt. Adapt, ad adisphoi. Ajax's thoughts fractured into incoherence, the pain drowning out his attempts to form coherent words as the ultra-divine water unleashed its fury upon him. In an instinctive attempt to ground himself, Ajax slammed his hands into the stone floor, the force slightly cracking the solid surface beneath him while an animalistic roar erupted from him, the most primal method of expressing agony. At this point, Ajax was no longer capable of coherent thought, the all-encompassing pain drowning any semblance of rationality left. The Z fighters stood in tense silence as they witnessed Ajax's torment, their postures stiff as they looked on in helpless shock and horror. At that moment, everyone was suddenly aware of the stark reality that Ajax was facing this trial alone, and there was not a single thing they could do to alleviate his suffering. All they could do was bear witness and hope that Ajax would emerge on the other side alive. He'll be doing that for a while. Corinne addressed the Z fighters somberly while sighing, knowing that this was the inevitable outcome. So, would anyone else like to give it a try? As he expected, Corinne was met with the sight of everyone vigorously shaking their heads. Since it seemed like there was now a lack of interest in challenging the ultra-divine water, Corinne carefully returned the ornamental teapot to the tray before turning away from the ongoing ordeal and withdrawing into his dwelling. Before disappearing into his sanctum, Corinne threw out one last statement. You should all follow Mr. Popo behind you. He'll take you to Cami's lookout. The Z fighters just stood there for a moment, utterly failing to comprehend Corinne's statement. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, they collectively pivoted, gasping in unison as their startled gazes landed on the silent figure that had been observing them from behind in ethereal stillness since time unknown. Of the group, Krillin's reaction was the most pronounced. A cartoon-like, pitch-perfect scream of fear tore from his throat, a complete octave higher than anyone had ever heard from him, as Krillin found himself mere inches from Mr. Popo, who had unfortunately been standing directly behind him. In response to their startled reactions, Mr. Popo, rather than dispelling their unease, replied with a smile that sent shivers down their spines. A sickening bone-crunching sound filled the air as Mr. Popo's unsettling smile widened. With Ajax's tormented screams serving as a haunting backdrop, everyone felt a creeping sense of dread crawling into their very core. "Hello, you worthless maggots. I'm here to guide your pathetic existence for your torture session. Follow me if you don't want to die." Mr. Popo's dark words hung in the air, its malevolence practically a palpable force. The Z-fighters exchanged uneasy glances before falling in line. Because when you introduce yourself like that, what else could they do but follow? Chapter 26 *, Climb if you don't want to die. 1 hour later. Ajax found himself splayed across the floor of Corin's tower, limbs scattered in disarray in every direction. True to its promise, his adaptive ability had successfully acclimated him to the repercussions of the ultra-divine water. The agony, once an overwhelming force of nature, had been reduced into a sensation he could now withstand with gritted teeth, an infinitely more bearable and preferable alternative. However, despite these adjustments, the effects of the ultra-divine water still lingered, intermittently triggering involuntary spasms in Ajax's body, as if responding to electrical currents. Desperately gasping for breath and completely drained of all strength, Ajax blinked through the lingering haze of torment that clouded his senses. The tower's shadows danced, playing tricks on his vision and challenging his efforts to forcefully dissipate the haunting memory of the ultra-divine water and the echoes of his screams from his mind. The excruciating pain he had just endured felt absolutely lethal, and he had a sneaking suspicion that without that specific clause in his wish, for both physical and mental adaptation, he would have died screaming like the rest. At the very least, if he did make it through, there was a strong likelihood he would have been driven to madness like the Longbottoms. God, he is going to swear in the name of all that he held sacred, his name, life, honor, soul, whatever it takes, to never subject himself to this shit again. The mere thought of reliving that experience is so repulsive to him that he literally cannot even put it into words. He'd choose any other fate over enduring that agony again. He genuinely would rather be eaten by zombies alive, which was his greatest fear up till just an hour ago, than that. In his opinion, being eaten alive would be a preferable alternative, as it would likely involve less overall pain in comparison. So, in summary, never again. He'd literally rather die 1,000 deaths. Remarkable. In just an hour, you've already stopped screaming. Corin exclaimed with genuine surprise beside Ajax. Ajax, wearied beyond measure, somehow managed to muster enough energy to flop his head towards Corin, his entire body groaning in protest against the simple movement. Facing Corin, who stood over him, Ajax had to admit he had no earthly idea when Corin had arrived or how long he'd been standing there. He had been just a bit preoccupied with trying not to die, you see. Yay! An extremely coarse whisper emerged from Ajax's mouth, the consequence of countless screams that clawed their way out of his throat not long ago. Still standing over the recovering Ajax, Corin couldn't suppress his chuckle at the rather unenthusiastic response. If you have the strength to respond even after all that, then I reckon you'll be able to pull through just fine. The corners of Corin's eyes formed a downward arc as he smiled with genuine joy. Do you realize you're making history right now? Take pride in this accomplishment because you're the first human in history to conquer this challenge. Yay, Ajax repeated, far too drained to conjure anything more elaborate. Corin burst into laughter, the sound echoing through the tower. That's the spirit. Corin exclaimed with mirth in his eyes. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, Corin leaned in, his laughter subsiding into a warm smile. Mr. Popo should be making his appearance soon. He has a knack for pushing someone to their absolute limits, so I suspect he'll arrive at the precise moment you regain the ability to move. Good luck, young warrior, the fate of the earth rests on your shoulders. With that, Corin discreetly tucked another senzu bean into Ajax's pocket, silently mouthing the words, last one I have. However, it appeared that Corin had an additional thought, as he spoke up moments later. Oh, this won't help with the residual pain from the ultra-divine water, but it'll remove any muscle tears or injuries from your spasms. Having imparted this information, he started waddling away like some fat penguin, disappearing beyond Ajax's line of sight. Although Ajax could have turned his head to follow Corin's departure, he was far too exhausted for a deep breath, let alone another movement of his head. However, the mere knowledge that he had a senzu bean tucked safely in his pocket brought a sense of reassurance. He'll eat that when he regains his ability to move. Lying sprawled on the floor of Corin's tower, Ajax directed his weary gaze toward the ceiling above. His mind, still reeling from ultra-divine water's trial, suddenly and unhelpfully prompted him that he had never seen the ceiling of Corin's tower, at least, not that he could recall. Ajax squinted. Well, the patterns resembled those found on the ceiling of some wooden cathedral, fitting for a congregation of naked angels to sing and frolic around. Ajax chuckled inwardly. He was glad at the distinctive lack of naked angels painted, carved, or otherwise adorning the ceiling. He was in far too much pain to be in the mood for angel schlongs. Not that he's ever in the mood for it. His interests lay elsewhere, particularly in the fairer sex and them fig. Oh God, he's rambling from the pain. Faintly, Ajax sensed a gradual ebbing of the pain, as if a tide was slowly receding. The teeth-gritting pain from moments earlier had settled to a dull, persistent ache, akin to a particularly bad stomachache, only everywhere. His muscles, which had felt like disconnected, limp noodles only moments ago, now exhibited signs of response to his mental commands. With motor control once again a part of his repertoire of skills, the presence of the senzu bean tucked in his pocket became an enticing siren, whispering sweet nothing into his ears. This is the perfect time to eat that. Ajax shifted, the movements slow and deliberate as he attempted to reach for the senzu bean. How long are you going to lay there, maggot? The authoritative and impatient voice cut through the air like a whip, snapping Ajax to attention. Ajax wearily turned his head, the once arduous task now more manageable, but his gaze was met with an abyss of black. He frowned. Disoriented, he shifted his head upward to the foreboding sight of Mr. Popo's ominous silhouette. Dread settled in Ajax's gut as a heavy premonition crashed upon him, sending shivers down his spine. No, it couldn't be. Could it? He must have misheard. You mute? Mago. Mr. Popo repeated, his words devoid of any warmth or patience. Ajax's fervent prayers against the impending reality and his desperate mental plea for mercy proved futile as his worst nightmares were confirmed, his eyes widening in horror in recognition. It's the abridged Mr. Popo. Ah! Ajax's voice erupted in a high-pitched scream. The moment of sheer terror infused him with an unexpected surge of strength and oxygen that he had not possessed before. This was an entity beyond mortal comprehension, a cosmic horror bundled up in the guise of a seemingly innocuous character. Facing this monstrous creation by the mad geniuses at TFS, a creature capable of inducing existential dread down Zeno's spine, is probably one of the few fates more horrifying than the ultra-divine water. He wants nothing to do with this eldritch abomination. This thing is strong enough to eat Bew for breakfast. He's practically an ancient one. Oh God, he can see the Louis Vuitton patterned tentacles already. Ah, you know how to show respect to your superiors. Good, Mr. Popo began, his unblinking gaze drilling into Ajax. For a maggot. The words crashed into Ajax's ears, evoking memories of a certain status hierarchy he oh so clearly remembers from his past life. With an almost casual callousness, Mr. Popo kicked Ajax's side. It was a restrained strike that normally would have only drawn a slight wince but now sent streaks of pain down Ajax's still very sensitive side. Get up, maggot. Motivated by his survival instincts, Ajax managed to rise to his feet with great difficulty. He definitely doesn't want to die, and disregarding abridged Mr. Popo was a guaranteed one-way trip to the Shadow Realm. He swallowed hard, attempting to suppress his trepidation about whatever command Mr. Popo was about to deliver. Climb. Ah, climb what? Climb to Cami's lookout if you don't want to die. Oh. And so, Ajax climbed, because what else could he do? 12 hours later. The climb to Cami's lookout, Ajax thinks, was incredibly monotonous. As he expected, his body had long adapted to any lingering effects of the ultra-divine water and the intense physical demands of the climb. Right now, scaling the power pole was about as taxing as a leisurely stroll. Whatever initial novelty the climb provided had long been worn off by the repetitive rhythm, leaving behind only a pervasive sense of boredom that clung to him like a persistent fog. In short, he's bored out of his freaking mind. As Ajax mechanically scaled the power pole, his mind wandered. Could he abuse this ability for theoretically infinite stamina? Can he use it to his advantage? He reasoned it might be difficult to overly exploit in direct combat. His ki reserves weren't boundless like his stamina, and running out of ki meant no amount of stamina would do him any good. However, the prospect of infinite stamina certainly held promise outside of combat, especially once he became of age for certain activities. A wry smile crossed Ajax's face. He's very much looking forward to the future. Ajax's eyes briefly shifted upward, getting an eyeful of Yamcha's but a few feet above his head. It's not like he's actively trying to see it, okay? But from this angle, that's all he can see of the darn guy. Hurry it up, man, it's only been 12 hours. Ajax called out, a mixture of impatience and good-natured ribbing lacing his voice. Above Ajax, Yamcha trembled as he climbed another 10 or so meters, practically glistening under the moonlight like some vampire out of twilight due to being drenched in his sweat. Clearly exhausted, Yamcha halted his progress, taking a brief moment to catch his breath and wipe the sweat from his brow with one hand. Screw off, Ajax. Not everyone can cheat like you, Yamcha bit out, breathing heavily. Have a little sympathy for the rest of us mortals, would you? I would've if you hadn't farted in my face. Ajax shot back with a disgusted expression. Stop being so close to my ass then. Yamcha shouted in reply, resuming his ascent at a quicker pace than before, seemingly eager to put some distance between himself and Ajax. Ajax sighed shortly after, realizing that Yamcha had a point. Not the part about his ass, but the cheating part. For him, this climb was nothing more than a mild inconvenience due to his adaptation, but for the others, this was a monumental challenge. Even Goku, the mighty protagonist himself, had resorted to bending the rules with the power pole the first time he ascended to the lookout in Dragon Ball. Ajax leaned against the pole, feeling the cool material pressed against his palms as he tightened his grip on it. Even now, he has no idea what this thing is made of. It felt like metal but looked like wood. For all he knows, it could be vibranium. Resting his chin on his hand, Ajax stared out into the expansive night sky. He can't see shit in the pitch-black surroundings, but the lack of visibility didn't hinder the view of the stars above, so at least he had them for company. Being so elevated above the ground, the absence of artificial light allowed the night sky to reveal its captivating splendor. The cosmic canvas stretched endlessly overhead, adorned with countless stars that sparkled like distant diamonds. Ajax marveled at its beauty. In his previous life, he never had the energy or inclination to gaze upward, due to being buried up to his nostrils in debt. Even if he had, he doubted he would have seen them through the bright lights of the city where he resided. Ajax drew in a deep breath, savoring the crisp night air. His eyes grew unfocused, taking in the entirety of the night sky and allowing the symphony of nature to envelop him in this moment of peace. He'll enjoy this moment as he waited for Yamcha's slow ass to climb higher. In this moment of relaxation, Ajax's thoughts automatically shifted to recent events. The canon seemed to be subtly progressing in an expected direction, diverging slightly from what he had remembered. Well, that's not quite right. It wasn't so much the events themselves changing, it was more like the character. No, people had deviated from their canonical selves. In the canon, Raditz had been notably crueler and more aloof, and Nappa was not as understanding either. The Saiyans, who were predictable for their ruthlessness, were revealing an additional layer of complexity not present in the original story. This deviation unsettled him because he can't predict a person's actions if he didn't understand them. Ajax had constructed the master plan based on the known personalities and behaviors of people in the canon. However, these deviations introduced an element of unpredictability, essentially throwing a wrench into his carefully crafted strategy. It felt like trying to navigate a path when the landmarks had suddenly changed. Regardless, as per the master plan, he wouldn't be ready to rock the boat until Namek at the earliest. After that, he will be at the forefront of the Z fighters in every way that matters. At that, he found himself wondering what other discrepancies existed between the reality he found himself in and the familiar canon he had known. Definitely Mr. Popo for one. A shiver of dread ran through Ajax at the mere thought of that being. Abridged Mr. Popo, just damn. It felt as if someone out there was intentionally playing him. Ajax shook his head, clearing his thoughts, a determined glint in his eyes. No matter. He would figure out a way to recalibrate the events and align them with the intended course for now. He just needed to embrace the idea of maintaining an open mind for unforeseen challenges and assimilating new information so he could adapt on the fly. As his train of thought pulled into its final station, Ajax looked upward to assess Yamcha's progress. To his surprise, Yamcha had stealthily advanced far into the distance without him even noticing. Wasn't he tired just a moment ago? Well, whatever. Back to the grind. Stern. DBA Corner, Ultra Divine Water and Potential. Okay, here's another DBA Corner. In response to readers' requests and feedback, I've decided to streamline the DBA Corners. After all, we're all here for the story and not my mad ramblings. Without further ado, this corner will briefly define potential and offer a glimpse at how the Ultra Divine Water works. Within DBA, combat power, or PL, refers to the current level of an individual. Potential, defined simply, is the untapped level of power that an individual could reach but has not yet attained. When a fighter realizes 100% of their potential, they have reached the pinnacle of their strength, becoming the strongest they can possibly be in terms of power. Please note that potential is different than talent. Talent is the rate at which one progress and gains strength. A talented individual with low potential means that he/she will reach their peak quickly and stop growing. Conversely, an individual with low talent and high potential will take ages to grow stronger but can eventually attain a level of power that others can only dream of. The UDW is a substance that enhances one's potential at the cost of life force. In the world of DBA, the greater the quantity of UDW consumed, the more compromised your life force becomes, making you more susceptible to diseases. However, the positive trade-off is an immediate boost in potential, resulting in increased power. Unfortunately, the UDW has no impact on one's talent. The above is a basic overview of how the UDW functions, and for the sake of avoiding spoilers, this is all that needs to be shared at this point. It'll become relevant again later on though, so please be patient. Chapter 27, Look Out, Look Out. 3 hours later. Climbing the last few steps of the ladder, Ajax stepped onto the lookout for the very first time. A tranquil breeze tousled Ajax's hair as he took in the awe-inspiring view from the top of the world. He stood there, relishing the embrace of the chilly wind and savoring the crisp freshness of the air, a distinct scent unique to high altitudes. A swift survey of his surroundings, however, showed that the other Z fighters were not sharing the moment of enjoyment with him. Among them, he had remained as the only person still upright, barely breaking a sweat at that. In contrast, scattered across the ground, the rest of the Z fighters lay collapsed, their bodies pushed beyond the limits of exhaustion from the arduous climb. Ajax felt just the tiniest twinge of guilt for breezing through the ordeal while the others suffered. But only just a little. Ajax flexed his hands, tightening them into fists. In trust, he hadn't been just unfazed, rather, he was feeling remarkably well and brimming with energy. Some of it, he suspected, came from the senzu bean he had eaten a little over half a day ago, while the rest likely stemmed from the effects of the ultra-divine water. Ajax's grin widened at his newfound lightness that left him in a state of heightened awareness and physical ease. The closest comparison he could draw was shedding some invisible, heavy coat he wasn't aware he had been wearing. Kind of like Boros casting off his armor or Rock Lee discarding his weights. It felt like the transition from a sluggish 30 FPS to a high-performing 120 FPS. Just buttery smooth. Redirecting his focus to the lookout itself, Ajax noticed a delicately laid-out walkway, bordered by strips of mini-gardens boasting a large variety of shrubs and flowers, leading straight to the main entrance. Numerous trees, their green leaves gracefully swaying in the breeze, adorned the lookout at various locations, adding a touch of nature to the otherwise impeccably maintained surroundings. A wave of nostalgia washed over him at the familiar sight. This really is the lookout. Ajax shifted his focus downward to the neat arrangement of white square tiles beneath his feet. His lips curled into an amused smile as he lightly tapped the smooth marble tiles with the tip of his foot. It seemed that the mad minds at TFS had gotten it right after all. Here on the lookout, all these squares did, in fact, make a circle. At that moment, the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, heralding the arrival of dawn and casting the lookout in warm hues of orange and gold. The doors to the lookout let out a slight creak as they swung open, unveiling Cami. He stepped out from the interior, trailed by the silent yet imposing figure of Mr. Popo. A serene smile graced Cami's aged face as he strolled in the morning light, casually observing the assembled group with an arched eyebrow. "Ah, I see that you've all managed to gather here, precisely 2 days later as I had requested," Cami said with faux surprise. "Since you are all so eager, shall we start your training immediately?" Cami's words were met with a collective chorus of groans from the assembled Z fighters. Cami chuckled heartily, deeply amused by both the response and the sight of the quivering piles of exhausted martial artists. "I think patience is a virtue, wouldn't you all agree?" Cami continued, collectively addressing the barely conscious group with a twinkle in his eye. He turned his attention to Mr. Popo, who stood beside him. "Old friend, would you be so kind as to escort them to the infirmary? It appears our guests need some time to fully absorb their first lesson." "Of course, Cami." Mr. Popo made a swift gesture before walking leisurely towards the main building with both hands clasped behind his back. Meanwhile, the Z fighters, still in their original spots, were magically pulled across the floor behind Mr. Popo as if an invisible rope was tethered to their foot. They were so fatigued that not a single person made any effort to protest as they were dragged across the lookout like limp noodles. They soon vanished around the corner, presumably headed towards the infirmary. Naturally, Cami did not overlook Ajax standing there in near-perfect condition, unaffected by the strain of the ascent. The guardian of Earth tilted his head, a spark of curiosity within his wise eyes. So, this was the remarkable young man who accomplished the impossible and survived the trials of the ultra-divine water, Cami mused. The very same boy who summoned Shenron to bestow upon himself a unique body and climbed to his lookout completely unruffled thanks to it. Speaking of Shenron, a few years ago, he had gotten into the habit of monitoring the Dragon Balls periodically, a precautionary practice born out of necessity after the disastrous events involving his evil counterpart. The memory of that fiasco had left an impression on him, and to ensure that history does not repeat itself, he had to become vigilant of any attempts to gather the Dragon Balls. He had initially been on high alert when he sensed someone gathering the Dragon Balls unusually quickly, fearing that a potential disaster had descended upon them once more. Thankfully, that apprehension dissipated as swiftly as it had arrived when he identified the individual responsible was none other than Goku. Cami could distinctly recall the sense of relief that swept over him upon this realization, since even among Earth's allies, Goku, known for his bravery and kindness, was someone Cami could trust without reservation. Cami nodded to himself as he observed the young boy. Even in hindsight, Cami harbored no regrets regarding his decision to trust Goku. He still believed that letting the wish be made unhampered is the correct judgment. Since then, Ajax has demonstrated himself to be a valuable addition to Earth's allies, and now they have another warrior in reserve to stand against the impending Saiyan threat. Suddenly and without any warning, Ajax bowed deeply, catching Cami off guard at the unexpected display of politeness. What a polite boy, Cami thought to himself, a subtle smile tugging his lips at the respectful gesture. Rise, my child, Cami said kindly, watching as Ajax straightened himself. Do you need to rest as well? Nope. I'm fresh and still a little high from the ultra-divine waters boost, Ajax declared, a light-hearted grin lighting up his face. Cami nodded in acknowledgement. Training shall commence at noon. In the meantime, feel free to explore and partake in the refreshments at the cafeteria as you please. There's no need to concern yourself with venturing where you shouldn't. I have arranged it so that certain areas are off-limits to all of you. Ajax mulled Cami's words over with a thoughtful expression as he absorbed the instructions. The fact that there was a cafeteria on the lookout surprised him, but he supposed it made sense. After all, this was technically a place of residence. Honestly, though, he couldn't care less. Free food is free food, and he is certainly not going to say no to that. Before Cami could redirect his focus elsewhere, Ajax reached out his hands while speaking up to capture Cami's attention. I have a favor to ask. Cami, who had been in the middle of turning away, halted and pivoted back to Ajax, shifting his staff slightly as he did so. The aged Namekian kept a steady gaze, though a touch of amusement colored his expression. As long as it is within my power. May I learn under you? Cami raised a single eyebrow, his amusement deepening at the question. Well, I certainly hope you do, considering that I've invited you all here for that exact purpose. Ah, I meant as your disciple? Cami released a noise of comprehension at the clarification. How embarrassing, it appears that he had misunderstood young Ajax's intentions. In his defense, to ask for such a thing not even 2 minutes after their initial meeting is quite ambitious. But ambition by its lonesome is not necessarily a negative quality. After all, wasn't he the same back during his heyday when he sought after the position of guardian? Cami appraised Ajax with a contemplative gaze. In his own way, Ajax mirrored the determination he himself once possessed, and well, come to think of it, he's never truly taught Goku, did he? Regrettably, the majority of my techniques are beyond my ability to impart to you. Many are of a magical nature and in most instances, tailored specifically to me and I suppose my malevolent counterpart, Cami explained as he advanced towards Ajax, narrowing the gap between them. However, I can guide you in the finer aspects of ki control, aspects that many, even Goku, are not aware are possible. Yes, please. Any other requests you'd like to get off your chest? Cami said while chuckling, feeling rather pleased with Ajax's eagerness. Ajax, already pleasantly surprised by Cami's willingness to entertain his prior request, now found himself handed another opportunity on a silver platter. If Cami was offering, then who was he to say no? Emboldened, Ajax seized the opening to make a request that could propel him forward significantly in terms of power. May I use the hyperbolic time chamber for training before the Saiyans arrive? Cami immediately frowned. No, he replied with a firmness in his tone that left no room for negotiation. What? Why? Ajax protested. The conditions there are too harsh for a human, Cami explained, his expression gravely serious. The interior has, by default, 10 times the gravity of Earth. You will not survive. You let Goku in when he was young. I suppose he told you that, Cami admitted, acknowledging the point. But did he tell you that even he lasted for only 3 months? Ajax is rightfully somewhat frustrated by Cami's refusal and attempts to counter by pressing the point. But why can't I try? If we don't get stronger fast, the Saiyans will kill everyone in a year. The gravity in the hyperbolic time chamber is not just a test of strength, and the toll it takes on the body is immense, Cami explained calmly, unfazed at Ajax's outburst. Your safety is paramount, and pushing yourself beyond your limits could have consequences. There are alternative methods of strengthening yourself without risking your well-being. Anyone observing Ajax's expression at that moment could perceive that the answer did not satisfy him. Cami, with his wisdom, easily recognized such signs and casually placed one arm behind his back as he continued to explain. Unlike Saiyans, humans have never genetically evolved to endure high gravity. The internal organs of humans have distinct upper limitations when exposed to high gravitational forces. Although these limits can be mitigated with ki, at present, all of you lack the strength required to survive, even with the assistance of ki. He paused at this point, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. Goku, as a Saiyan, is different. Saiyans, with their unique biology, are better equipped to withstand these extreme conditions. They possess a natural resilience that humans lack. But my body can adapt. Ajax rebutted, undeterred by the explanation, before pausing and blinking. Actually, I'm not sure if you know about the wish I made. I do, but you need to understand, young Ajax, that gravity training is inherently different than weight training. Gravity exerts its influence not only on your muscles but your entire physiology, from your bones to your organs. The moment you enter, your blood will rush to your feet and unconsciousness will follow within minutes, if that. Be exposed for an extended duration and your heart will collapse under the strain of pumping blood against a gravity it cannot handle. Cami leveled a solemn look at Ajax. Can your body adapt fast enough? Tell me, how much time did it take for you to acclimate to the ultra-divine water? Cami continued despite Ajax's silence. To undergo gravity training effectively, you must gradually increase the gravity, not jump straight to 10 times all at once. The human body is resilient, yes, but it requires time to gradually build strength. Even with ki, there are limits as to how much strain the human body can withstand, and subjecting it to extreme conditions without understanding or respecting its limitations will result in irreversible damage at best. And I cannot afford to risk endangering any of your lives for such an endeavor, at least not until I am certain you possess the strength necessary to endure it. Ajax brought a hand to his chin, gently rubbing it as he considered Cami's words. He was attempting to think of a reasonable argument to persuade the elder Namekian, as he still had uncertainties about the accuracy of Cami's statement. After all, hadn't the Z fighters managed to endure the gravity on King Kai's planet? This doesn't make any sense. How did they? Oh shit. They were dead. The rules must have worked differently for those who had passed away. It is entirely possible that factors such as internal organs, sustenance and stamina were just not as important for the deceased as the living. Goku, for example, could use his Super Saiyan 3 form against Bu with considerably more ease when he had a halo above his head than when he didn't. So, it's possible that the Z fighters and him might have died on King Kai's planet had they been there while alive. Damn, he dodged a fat bullet there, as training at King Kai after Raditz had briefly been on the MASDRPLAN. Meanwhile, Ajax's mind continued to churn. While he could come to accept that humans below a certain power threshold just cannot survive 10x gravity, it just gave rise to another question. See, Cami claimed he let Goku in the hyperbolic time chamber due to having confidence in Saiyan physiology. But when Goku entered... Okay, something about this didn't add up. Emerging from his contemplation, Ajax eyed Cami suspiciously. How did you know that Kid Goku was a Saiyan before Raditz arrived? Chapter 28, Disciple of God. Cami was taken aback, not expecting such scrutiny on such a minor detail nor the slightest hint of accusation in Ajax's voice. Despite this, Cami's response was composed, as one might expect of the Guardian of Earth. In accordance with my responsibilities as the Guardian of Earth, I closely monitor foreign influences on Earth, Cami explained. The arrival of a baby in a spaceship falls within the scope of that duty. But that doesn't explain how you knew he was a Saiyan. You are very perceptive, young Ajax, which is a commendable quality to have, Cami acknowledged with a sigh. He paused for a moment, his gaze holding a mixture of understanding and something akin to paternal concern. However, I, of all people, am not your adversary. There are matters at play that extend beyond your current understanding, my boy. Haha, nope. What matters at play? Unlike what Cami thinks, Ajax is armed with extensive knowledge of the Dragon Ball universe, so there should be no surprises of this nature, especially not so close to home. After all, this isn't a matter of someone taking a wrong turn or having two variants of senzu beans. This is something fundamental, akin to Goku knowing he was the one responsible for Grandpa Gohan's death all along. The best-case scenario is if Cami had acquired said knowledge from the remains of Goku's ship, or if this was an inherent minor difference between timelines. In that instance, he's overestimating the significance of the situation. However, if this disparity were caused by other external influences, such as, God forbid, the Time Breakers, then he's royally F***ed. Ajax's exposure to Dragon Ball had been limited to the source material and fanfiction, leaving his knowledge of non-canon materials, except prominent movies, pitifully low. In fact, pitifully low might even be an overstatement. In reality, he knows next to nothing about characters like Tower, the Time Breakers, or similar villains. Nevertheless, Ajax chose to set aside those thoughts for the time being. Even if they are valid concerns, he currently lacks the ability to address them, and dwelling on them now will only unnecessarily stress him out. There's no point in grilling Cami about it either, since it's not like Cami will just tell him. He has to remember what Krillin advised, one thing at a time. He will adapt, as he has always done. Ajax parted his lips, another appeal for the time chamber on his tongue. However, before he could make a single sound, Mr. Popo manifested abruptly, materializing a mere foot away from Ajax. The sudden appearance scared the shit out of Ajax, his intended words silenced and replaced by a startled curse as he instinctively recoiled backward. "Are you disrespecting Cami in my presence?" "An interesting way to commit suicide, maggot," Mr. Popo declared in his iconic drawl with a rather sinister undertone. "Now shut up before I bury you 6 feet under like the maggot you are proving to be." Ajax made the mistake of speaking once more. But Mr. Popo's hands moved with startling speed, forcefully slamming into Ajax's throat. With ease one might expect from lifting a soft pillow, Mr. Popo hoisted Ajax off the ground, suspending him in the air solely by the firm grip around his throat. "Did you think I was joking?" Ajax had never clenched his jaw shut as fast as he had upon hearing those words, the surge of primal instinct temporarily overriding any desire to speak. However, despite the precarious situation, Ajax was not panicked, at least, not beyond the initial shock. Regrettably, Master Roshi's personal brand of discipline had been strikingly similar, just less forceful, whenever he behaved like a little shit. In short, it certainly wasn't the first time Ajax had found himself dangling by the neck, which is why he knew that Mr. Popo had no intentions of killing him. The fact that he can still breathe, albeit with some difficulty, and the absence of a crushed windpipe, all point to that conclusion. The air hung heavy with tension as Ajax hung limply in Mr. Popo's grip, locking eyes defiantly with the displeased Mr. Popo. "Please cease, Mr. Popo. That is not the manner in which we treat our guests," Cami interjected immediately, lifting a hand in a subtle yet authoritative gesture that signaled Mr. Popo to stand down. "Young Ajax did not show disrespect towards me." "Of course, Cami." Mr. Popo acquiesced to Cami's command, relinquishing his hold on Ajax's throat as he retreated, resuming his position beside the guardian. "My sincerest apologies. It was not my intention to inflict harm upon you," Cami expressed regretfully, his gaze filled with remorse as he observed the coughing Ajax. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine," Ajax reassured, recovering both his breath and composure. He cast a wary eye at Mr. Popo, now a silent sentinel behind Cami once more. Sensing Cami's lingering regret, Ajax decided to test the waters once more. At this point, any opportunity would suffice. "Can I use the time chamber once you deem me qualified to enter then?" Ajax inquired, attempting a more subdued and tentative tone. His gaze flickered between Cami and Mr. Popo, searching for any signal of approval or objection. The elderly Namekian raised his head, his wise eyes focused on a distant point as he contemplated Ajax's request. "I suppose that's possible, although it will require a considerable duration for you to meet the necessary criteria," Cami conceded with a measured nod, redirecting his attention to Ajax's figure. "But I can see you still haven't given up on the chamber, so allow me to demonstrate something to you." Cami raised his venerable staff, and a gentle white radiance emanated from its tip, casting a soft glow that persisted even in the well-lit surroundings. The luminous energy traveled down the length of the cane in a mesmerizing spiral, weaving an ethereal pattern as it descended. Instantly, Ajax was gripped by paralysis, as if he were ensnared by an unseen force. Actually, that's not quite correct. He could still move, albeit laboriously, but every movement, no matter how minuscule, demanded an extraordinary effort, as if he were moving through thick molasses. Even the breath in his lungs felt dense, forcing him to deliberately push his chest outward to breathe. He can sense the very atmosphere wrap and press against him like an invisible coffin, instantly creating a stifling sensation that leaves him feeling breathless. "Wah, what's this? What did you do?" Ajax gritted out with difficulty. It's an advanced form of external ki manipulation. More specifically, it involves the expansion of one's ki force field beyond the body surface, and through this process, the air becomes infused with my ki, resulting in the manifestation of a sphere of influence that grants me limited control over its density, Cami explained patiently. For the time being, you can consider it as an advanced variation of ki. Cami observed with amusement as Ajax's jaws dropped open in astonishment. It is so very refreshing to be the recipient of such dumbfounded expressions of awe once in a while. Truth be told, such positive reinforcement was a rarity for him on the lookout, because while Mr. Popo is a valued friend, his ability to express emotions was lacking. In fact, Cami couldn't recall ever seeing Mr. Popo genuinely impressed by anything. "To put it briefly, I increased the density of the air around you," Cami said, briefly spinning his staff with a flick of his hand. "So, if you feel like you are moving in a viscous liquid, that's because you essentially are." Ajax's mouth dropped even lower. This was like no other technique shown in Dragon Ball. "No, actually," he lied. "This skill does bear some similarities to the unnamed technique Super Saiyan God Goku showcased against Broly. However, this was not God Ki, it was not the era of Dragon Ball Super, and this was certainly not plucked from the pages of the canon. This was uncharted territory, a brand new dimension of Ki control he hadn't thought possible." However, Cami's lecture was far from finished, and he proceeded, seamlessly continuing his lesson. "Your wish has bestowed upon you the ability to adapt to any negative conditions inflicted on you, allowing you to persist despite injuries and, as you've experienced, also adapt to fatigue," Cami explained, the atmosphere shifting as his expression grew a little more serious. "I'm certain you've been told on numerous occasions that this ability has weaknesses. This is one more. As is evident in your current situation, your ability does not extend to your surroundings, thus rendering you vulnerable to environments does not directly harm you." Cami began to purposefully stroll towards Ajax, each deliberate step echoing as he circled him. The Guardian's movements were methodical, and he systematically tapped Ajax at various points on his body with his staff. "Environments that directly inflict harm, such as magma or the vacuum of space, you can adapt to, given you survive long enough," Cami elaborated, his words in tandem with the tapping of his cane against the floor. "However, what of environments that are more passive?" For instance, Cami halted his pacing with a purposeful stop after completing another circuit around Ajax. Standing right before the young fighter, Cami's gaze bore down on him. "What if someone were to seal you in the hardest substance known to the universe? It inflicts no damage upon you, so there's nothing to adapt to. At the same time, you are unable to break free since you lack the means to damage it." A chill coursed down Ajax's spine at the hypothetical scenario. The situation painted by Cami had resonated deeply, guiding his thoughts down a path that Ajax definitely should have, but had never before trodden. Damn it, Cami was right. Faced with such a situation, what options did he even have? "Shit," Ajax quietly murmured, a subdued acknowledgement of this vulnerability. This, he thinks, is the essence of an excellent mentor. Someone who could promptly pinpoint areas for growth, provide unexplored perspectives, and confront their students with challenges. Master Roshi was the same. Meanwhile, Cami resumed his purposeful pacing around Ajax, as he found himself entangled in the undercurrent of realization. "You may be contemplating breaking through those walls through sheer force, believing that with enough punches, strength, and blunt force adaptation, you could eventually breach them," Cami remarked, pausing beside Ajax and employing his staff to gently press against Ajax's arms. "But will you? The erasure of fatigue, muscle tears, and other adverse conditions doesn't inherently translate to an improvement in skill or speed. It's more akin to a reset button, alleviating the burdens of your exertion rather than propelling you into newfound prowess." Cami continued to speak. "As you know, strength originates from the process of breaking and healing muscles. Your ability enables you to adapt to muscle tears and subsequently demand a greater force to induce them," Cami clarified, his voice carrying his insight. "Yet, consider this, while you may potentially double your resistance to muscle tears through your ability through a few repetitions, can you double your strength after those same few repetitions? Eventually, the force necessary to instigate even the smallest microtears would surpass your maximum physical strength. Then, the development of your physical strength will cease." Ajax blinked. Well, Cami is wrong there. Ajax had already observed this phenomenon during training sessions with Master Roshi, that the required effort to induce physical strain is rapidly surpassing his current strength. He had anticipated this eventuality, and a pivotal step of the master plan in the future will make this weakness moot, but Cami is unaware and will remain unaware of the masterplan. But even if you could succeed through physical force, what if you can't punch your problems away, like right now? Cami asserted, grounding the lesson in the immediate context. For example, if I were to do this. To emphasize the statement, Cami clenched his hands and forcefully slammed his cane against the ground, the reverberating impact resonating throughout the air. In an instant, Ajax found himself immobilized. The air, once viscous, now seemed to have solidified into an unyielding mass of stone that made any movement impossible. Even his chest remained immobile, thwarting every attempt to draw breath. And render your surroundings as dense as stone? Cami posed the question, before proceeding to methodically dissect the elements of the scenario. There is no fatigue to alleviate. There is no negative condition to adapt to. There is no resistance to build, as you have never recovered from it. There is no chance to disrupt it with physical force. Cami observed Ajax calmly, watching as Ajax's eyes darted to and fro in panic while closely monitoring his condition. He intends to maintain a heightened level of panic to drive home his point, but he harbors no intention of causing actual harm to the young warrior. And most importantly, you lack the necessary key control to wrest control of the environment, Cami declared, striking at the heart of the matter. So, tell me, young Ajax, what can you do? Ajax gritted his teeth, a futile attempt at alleviating the burning agony in his lungs. He can't breathe. Desperation clawed at him as the constricting surroundings left him gasping for air that refused to enter his lungs. He can't breathe. Panic surged through his consciousness as every fiber of his being screamed for oxygen, his chest convulsing in a desperate struggle for air. He needs to breathe. Even amid his suffering, Ajax's body stood frozen like a terracotta soldier, forcing him to stare into Cami's unervingly calm eyes. That's right, Ajax. You can't do anything. You lose, Cami declared with definitive finality. Moments later, Cami forcefully slammed his staff against the ground. In an instant, the atmosphere ensnaring Ajax shattered, the solidified air reverting to its natural state once more. Ajax barely managed to catch himself with a stumbling step, nearly collapsing to the ground as the claustrophobic grip abruptly vanished. He took deep, heavy breaths to replenish his oxygen-starved lungs and placed his hands on his knees. In that position, facing the white marble beneath him, Ajax steadied himself, anchoring his mind after one of the most terrifying ordeals he had ever faced. Cami subtly shifted forward, barely more than an inch, a movement intended to capture attention rather than to close distance. So, can you trust me when I say you're not ready for 10 times gravity, young Ajax? Cami watched as Ajax, his face still directed toward the ground, nodded. The point of all this, young Ajax, is not to scare you. This is a lesson, that whatever an adversary hurls your way or even your own vulnerabilities, can be influenced by Ki. Through the mastery of Ki, you unlock answers to problems that others have no solutions for. Feats that you never thought possible become possible, for you. Cami extended a hand toward Ajax. Would you like to learn? I can teach you. Ajax, staring at the outstretched hand, clenched his jaws, and with a resolute grip, he accepted Cami's hand, allowing himself to be pulled into a standing position. Cami smiled as their eyes met. Welcome to Cami's Lookout, disciple. Chapter 29, of Love and Virginity. 2 months after Raditz's arrival. Amidst the 2 rows of palm trees that flanked the lookout's main entrance, Ajax diligently performed his morning kata, engaging in the time-honored and ancient art of working his butt off. Gracefully maneuvering through the intricate forms of the kata, Ajax's breath materialized into a misty cloud in the brisk morning air. With clenched teeth, Ajax pushed through the precise movements at the required speed, fighting against the viscosity of the air around him at every step. He can feel his heart pounding within his chest, the satisfying burning of his muscles, and the sensation of his sweat-drenched GI clinging to his form. The vibrant red GI was darkened by the sweat from Ajax's intense exercise, resembling rich, flowing blood, and is a striking contrast against the sun's golden rays. Ajax is convinced that everything must be perfectly picturesque, but he can hardly find it in himself to appreciate any of it when the piercing sunlight is practically blinding him, even after squinting. All in all, he feels kinda gross, and blinded by the sun, and cold at that, all of which are annoyingly impinging on his personal introspection time. Speaking of introspection time, a surprising number of events had occurred in the past 2 months. Notably, Cami had decided to play a hands-on role in his training after their little conversation. At every single moment, the airspace around him was under Cami's dominion, constantly maintaining a density akin to honey at the minimum. As if that wasn't challenging enough, Cami occasionally fluctuated the density without warning, leading him to lose balance and fall on his ass on more than one occasion. However, the regimen didn't end there. Every article of clothing he wore was greatly weighted, courtesy of Mr. Popo. Like Cami, Mr. Popo periodically opted to increase the clothing's weight, but unlike Cami, Mr. Popo is one sadistic son of a bitch. To Ajax's great annoyance, the genie's manipulations often left him sprawling in an Ajax-sized crater on multiple occasions. He swears to God, one day, when he's confident that Mr. Popo can't easily kill him, he will punch that dick in his insufferable face. Hard. Over the past 2 months, rather than a meteoric rise, his power level advanced at a steady pace, which, while underwhelming, aligned with his expectations. Unsurprisingly, weight training didn't yield significant gains in power levels but did contribute noticeably to his physical strength. He supposes that high-gravity training will be different in that it would theoretically fortify your internal organs and circulatory system as well, which might be the main cause of increased ki and power levels. Unfortunately, Cami has yet to give him the green light for the time chamber. Whining aside, he has to give credit where it's due. During Cami's training, his adaptation didn't activate in response to his physical conditioning as much as he had anticipated. Somehow, his working theory was that since Cami made sure he never fully recovered from his muscle soreness, his adaptation couldn't fully activate. Unfortunately, this means that he's in constant pain from said muscle soreness, but fortunately, he can easily ignore it thanks to his experience with the ultra-divine water. The good news is that he did experience a notable burst in power level post-ultra-divine water, and while it isn't the most dramatic increase in the world, the practical results in his sparring sessions spoke volumes. Krillin, who had once been a formidable opponent for him in the past, now frequently found himself on the back foot. Directly following the boost from the ultra-divine water, Ajax is already capable of engaging Krillin on equal footing, matching him blow for blow. After 2 months of Cami's intensive training, he outclasses Krillin physically in strength, speed, and very soon height as well. Oftentimes, Krillin struggled to inflict any damage on him, while he could, even during the worst-case scenarios, consistently outlast Krillin through strategic counters and efficient ki management. Krillin just wasn't a challenge anymore. Ajax snickered at the thought. His senpai was very salty when he realized that. Also, the moon has spectacularly exploded recently, which he supposes is an indication that Gohan is doing fine under Piccolo's tutelage. He knew that Gohan would become an invaluable asset in the upcoming battles and is the crucial piece for the Master Plan's endgame. However, the future could wait. For now, Gohan can deal with his own shit by himself. Ajax had bigger fish to fry. Truth is, if Raditz was the training wheels, the tutorial so to speak, then the confrontation with Vegeta and Nappa is his first true test. Correspondingly, the objectives he must achieve in that battle are more difficult and numerous than with Raditz. This time, however, observing passively is a luxury he could no longer afford. Ajax shakes his head to dispel distracting thoughts. He needs to worry about his own ass at the moment. Today, he will seize the initiative to ask. I should make some time to talk with Marin about what's happening, Krillin mused aloud. He stretched his arms, attempting to warm them up for the training ahead, but the physical activity couldn't conceal the guilt written across his face. In hindsight, I haven't really explained to her why I'm leaving. I just told her I needed a year of training to save Earth and left it at that. Ajax drew a deep breath, attempting to suppress his annoyance as he powered through the final set of his kata. His introspection would be considerably easier, he thinks, if he weren't constantly surrounded by the buzz of inane, romantic gossip. Why did they have to constantly remind him he had been eternally single, and still a virgin in his past life? Why couldn't they be more like Tien, and keep their own romantic ventures to themselves? Oh yeah, I have to tell Launch as well. Lunch could understand, but Launch, not so much. Tien added nonchalantly, like he hadn't just dropped a major bombshell. Screw you too, Tien. Aruok. Ajax screamed internally, too busy mentally screeching in outrage to feel shock at the news. His one-sided trust had just been ruthlessly betrayed. Krillin, on the other hand, was unmistakably taken aback and almost ate marble at the news. What? Since when were you dating Lunch? Or Launch? Tien simply turned his head to the side, redirecting his attention to his stretches, nonchalantly disregarding Krillin's physical reaction. Ever since Goku recommended finding love to me, but don't worry about it. Weit, tell me, Tien. 'Cause I definitely will worry about it. Almost on the other side of the lookout, Yamcha crouched, stretching his hamstrings with a noticeable air of dejection. Well, at least you guys still have girlfriends. Bulma broke up with me. Krillin rolled his eyes and leaned down to touch his toes, having recovered from his near faceplant earlier. Okay, look dude, I felt bad for you the first, 16 times you said it, but I'm going to be honest. You kind of brought it upon yourself with your cheating. Besides, she said she needed a break to think about everything that's happened, and you need to train. This break was inevitable regardless of how well the relationship is going. But she's just going to end our relationship afterward. Yamcha wailed, the uncertainty of his love life casting a shadow over his typically self-assured demeanor. And for the record, I only brought it up 5 times. Krillin raised his hand in a hold-up, wait a minute gesture. Okay, stop. The mere fact that you had to pause and think about how many times you said it meant that you said it too much. Come on man, get your shit together. Ajax, his patience finally exhausted, stopped his kata to give the Z fighters a piece of his mind. However, as he turned, he nearly leaped out of his skin at the sight of Mr. Popo standing eerily still, right at the corner of the building. With only his head visible, he peered at them unblinkingly, his bloody red lips stretched into a macabre facsimile of a smile. Ajax felt a cold sweat break out from the jump scare. Dear God, just how long has the prick been lurking there? Mr. Popo broke into laughter upon locking eyes with Ajax. However, it wasn't a jovial laugh. The other Z fighters, who were oblivious to the peeping Tom, all collectively flinched as Mr. Popo's eerie laughter reached their ears. One by one, the Z fighter woodenly swiveled around, their expressions shifting from casual camaraderie to sheer traumatization. The sound of Mr. Popo's laughter had resurrected their memories of past training sessions that they had fervently tried to bury in their mental graveyard. Mr. Popo abruptly spoke in his usual emotionless drawl. Greetings, ladies. Cami will be with you shortly for your morning torture session. He stated, addressing the Z fighters with an air of detached amusement. Your breakfast, featuring Mr. Popo's nutritious ghost peppers, will be prepared. They're ghost peppers but with nutrient paste stuffed inside. You must tilde. Having conveyed his message, Mr. Popo started to dissolve from existence. His form blurred, grew faint and then vanished entirely. He can't be serious, right? Yajirobe's complexion visibly paled, and he bent over slightly, as though on the verge of retching. A ripple of nervous laughter and uneasy glances circulated among the Z fighters. Remember the last time he prepared a meal for us? Ramen with noodles made from mashed jalapenos and broth that had more spice than actual broth, Kairatsu recounted to everyone, shivering and looking a little green. Kairatsu's words brought forth a collective shudder from the Z fighters, the vivid memory of that fiery concoction still haunting their taste buds. And what do you know, Yajirobe actually did lean over and retch. Ajax vividly remembered that day. The distinctive flavor of the ramen had mercilessly assaulted his palate, not unlike a storm of hellfire descending from the sky. For a moment, he completely understood what it was like to be Natsu Dragneel. However, his adaptation swiftly took effect, and Ajax discovered that the flavor had transformed into something surprisingly pleasant. He couldn't recall what in the Seven Hells prompted him to do so, but he ended up complimenting Mr. Popo on the dish. Naturally, everyone, including Cami, had cast absolutely bewildered looks at him, as if he had grown a third head. But then again, since none of them had drank the ultra-divine water as he had, they had no right to judge. Apparently, Mr. Popo appreciated the compliment, as there was not one instance of an Ajax-shaped crater in the following 2 days. Still going to sock him in the face though. Ajax closed his eyes, using a brief moment of serenity to clear his mind. He is going to accomplish a significant goal today. With purposeful steps, Ajax walked up to Tien. Good morning, Mr. Tien Shinhan. Chapter 30, Legacy of the Crane School. Ajax's words had seized the attention of the Z fighters. The group, who had resumed their morning activities, now collectively pivoted toward the unfolding conversation, eager to witness the unfolding exchange. Tien Shinhan spared Ajax a side glance as he finished up his morning stretches. Good morning to you too, Ajax. You know that just Tien is fine. I know. I'm just being formal for a formal request. Ajax took a deep breath. This is it. He executed a brief bow to Tien Shinhan. I would like to learn from you. The peanut gallery around Ajax and Tien gasped in unison, strategically synchronizing their response for dramatic effect. Entertainment is a rare commodity on the lookout, and by now, they were all like sharks attuned to the scent of blood, ready to pounce on anything even remotely resembling drama. And this time, blood is definitely in the water. They watched with bated breath in anticipation of Tien's response. Tien paused his morning stretches, rising to face Ajax directly. The inquiry had genuinely caught him off guard. They were on Cami's lookout after all, and it seemed inconceivable to him that he would be the preferred choice over Cami himself. It baffled him, to be honest. Is there some kind of ulterior motive here? What is Ajax after? You want me to teach you? Yes. And what exactly are you expecting me to teach you? Tools and strategies to survive a battle. The mentality necessary to take down an enemy decisively. The skills and battle philosophy of the Crane School. Tien frowned. Mentioning the Crane School had stirred up some uncomfortable memories. Those days were far behind him, and given the conflict that had unfolded between him and his former mentors, he had no interest in returning to that time either. I don't teach people how to kill. Decisively does not necessarily mean death. Why me? I mean, who else? Apart from Kairatsu, everyone else is a student of the Turtle School, and asking Kairatsu is the same as asking you. Tien, arms folded, continued to probe. And why should I teach you? Other than being at our strongest, so you know, we don't meet our painful, gruesome, and gory demise at the hands of the Saiyans? Ajax replied matter-of-factly, his expression as dry as the Sahara Desert. Tien cast an amused look at the sass. Yes, other than that. Why teach you, an alumnus of the Turtle School? The Crane School and the Turtle School did not keep the most amicable of relationships. Ajax rolled his eyes. Who cares about that inter-school rivalry anymore? That stuff got old before the original Dragon Ball series reached its end. He quipped. Says the guy who knows our signature move, the Kamehameha. The peanut gallery accompanied Ajax's quip with a synchronized ooh-hoo. Ignoring the live audience soundtrack, Ajax could already tell, even at this point in the conversation, that Tien wasn't vehemently opposed to his proposition, and that was more than sufficient for him. It's time to go on the offensive. Shifting gears, Ajax altered the conversation's tone, adopting a more serious demeanor, and directed his focused gaze at Tien. All jokes aside, I have a question for you, Tien. How many noteworthy martial artists use the Crane School style right now? 4. Shen, Ta, Me, and Yaotsu. Martial artists. Me and Kairatsu. And how many people do you anticipate asking for your guidance on the techniques of the Crane School? Tien narrowed his eyes at the response. Are you insinuating that I am incapable of acquiring more students? Ajax shook his head, realizing his previous choices of words may have been less than ideal. Let me phrase that. How many individuals who have reached the lofty standards set by Corinne or Cami, do you think will approach you for training in the Crane School style? Exactly. Even by those lofty standards, the Turtle School boasts Master Roshi, along with Yamcha, Krillin, Goku, and myself. Assuming everything doesn't go completely sideways, Gohan will be accepted as well. Even you carry our legacy by wielding the Kamehameha. Ajax tilted his head like a barn owl, maintaining unblinking eye contact with Tien Shinhan. On the other hand, who, aside from you and Kairatsu, possesses knowledge of the Dodon Ray, the Kikaho, or other signature moves of the Crane School? No one. Should you and Kairatsu fall in the upcoming battle, the duty of upholding the legacy of the Crane School will be left to the likes of Shen and mercenary Tao. A deep silence settled on those gathered, every member stunned by Ajax's words. They had realized by now that the conversation before them was more than some mere spectacle or inane drama. The gravity of the point Ajax made resonated, and none of them had fully grasped the situation of the Crane School until the very moment it was pointed out to them in such a manner. And you will uphold the legacy of the Crane School? Tien inquired, unfolding his arms and fixing Ajax with a scrutinizing stare. If you'll have me. Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, Yamcha interjected, Hold on, you're already skilled in the turtle style. Why do you need the crane style too? If you pour water on an oil fire, you'll only fuel the flames, Ajax replied, maintaining unbroken eye contact with Tien. Yeah, so. Yamcha responded, confused and absent-mindedly scratching his head. Excite. What a drag. There's more than one way to put out a fire, Yamcha, and I don't have the luxury to have water as my only recourse. Tien locked eyes with Ajax, meeting the intensity of the stare easily. At that moment, Tien observed the young boy before him. Really looked at him, perhaps for the very first time. This kid has potential. At the very least, as far as mental strength goes, Ajax likely outshines even Tien himself. Surviving the ultra-divine water, abilities or not, was no small feat, and Tien had no confidence in replicating such an achievement. And as a potential student, Tien couldn't refute that he might not find a more promising pupil anywhere else. You know, I was already inclined towards helping you given the impending Saiyan invasion. I just wanted to understand your motivations and test your resolve. A slightly sadistic smile appeared on Tien's face. However, unfortunately for you, you've truly convinced me. You want to be my student? Fine. You're in, but I'm not going to let you take your words back. A feral grin mirroring Tien's spread across Ajax's face as he met the Triclops' gaze. You can save those words for someone else because I don't intend on taking them back. I stand by my commitments. However, at this moment, a hand settled on Ajax's shoulder, firmly anchoring him in place. Ajax could feel the air around him stiffen and he grimaced, his face scrunching up like a kid who was caught with both hands in the cookie jar. He turned around, apprehensive, only to see Cami smiling sweetly and merrily down at him, the aged Namekian's eyes practically disappearing into slits. Oh no. Ajax had seen this expression before, on Chi-Chi. So, you stand by your commitments? Is that so, my disciple? Cami said calmly, still smiling. It's rather disheartening to see you forsake me this way. Am I no longer satisfactory? Do I no longer excite you? Ajax grimaced even more at Cami's statement. It. A surge of nerves gripped Ajax as he fumbled and stammered over his words in an attempt to explain himself, desperately trying to convey his thoughts without offending his mentor. He raised his hands in a placating gesture. I didn't, this isn't. His voice trailed off awkwardly. Tien, who was out of Ajax's sight having been behind him, arched an eyebrow at Cami. Sensing the cue from the elderly Namekian, he plunged into the conversation headfirst with an overly dramatic gasp. So, you're cheating on me? Tien's voice oozed with mock offense and disbelief. The disciple of Cami, the Turtle School, and now me too? Am I just your side chick? Ajax, caught off guard by the unexpected turn of events and comment, spun around and gaped at Tien. What in the F***ck is happening? Is reality turning sideways or something? Is he the butt of a joke right now? However, at the sight of the seriousness etched across Tien's face, Ajax's confusion took on an air of genuine panic as he struggled to find the right words to placate all parties and defuse the escalating situation. He failed miserably. Cami furrowed his ancient brow, deep in contemplation, as he turned to Mr. Popo with a quizzical expression. Mr. Popo, what's the term I'm searching for, of someone who has a foot in each boat? I'm afraid the word eludes me. Mr. Popo, ever straightforward, didn't miss a beat in his response, a man ***re. No, not that, Cami sweat-dropped, shaking his head with a small chuckle. Unfaithful. That's the term I was searching for. Same difference. Cami gave Mr. Popo an amused look. Yamcha and Krillin, who had witnessed the subtle wink Cami had exchanged with Tien earlier as well as Ajax's still dumbfounded expression, finally reached their breaking point and erupted into laughter. The contagious mirth spread rapidly, infecting everyone, except Mr. Popo. Even Cami joined in, a fist held to his mouth with graceful poise and chuckling with a deep and hearty sound. Amidst the joyous commotion, Ajax's panic instantly gave way to a deadpan expression. Clearly, he had been duped. Hey! Ajax's protest only fueled the laughter around him, amplifying the amusement of the others. Ajax crossed his arms, his deadpan expression now accompanied by a light pout. In truth, he was just glad it was all a jest. Slowly but surely, Ajax found himself caught up in the infectious laughter, and his initial deadpan expression cracked, soon laughing along with the others. Ajax allowed himself to enjoy this moment, as it was likely the last respite before the relentless grind truly began. He supposes that if this were an anime, this would be the perfect time for a training montage cutscene. Unfortunately, this was reality. There weren't going to be any flashy training sequences or dramatic musical accompaniments to help him pass the time. Ajax felt himself relax. All right. Time to get to work. Stern. Q. Remember the Name by Fort Minor. Stern. 3 months after Raditz's arrival. The solar flare requires you to channel your ki into a single focal point, much like the initial step of forming a ki blast. However, the key is to not condense it, as you would a Kamehameha. Tien explained, his arms folded across his chest and squinting for his own safety as he closely observed Ajax's execution of the technique. Ajax furrowed his brow in concentration. With a determined look, he attempted to replicate the technique, channeling his ki as instructed. However, instead of a blinding burst of light, a pitifully feeble energy ball left his hands, floating wobbly before dissipating with a sad poof. Tien's expression remained stoic, but a hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. Not quite. You need to infuse more pressure and power than that. Maintain the same intensity of ki as you would in a regular attack, but gather it without limiting its volume.
Got it.
3 months, 2 weeks after Raditz's arrival. A thin, luminous beam of ki, resembling a laser, landed upon the tiles of the lookout. The concentrated energy created a sizzling sound as it made contact with the surface, burning a small, smoking orifice into the once pristine marble. This is how you do the Dodone ray. Kairotsu floated gracefully in the air, a small ball of energy crackling on his fingertips. It's fast hot, and requires almost no charge time. Ajax observed attentively, absorbing the details of the technique. The Dodone ray appeared to be a versatile technique for rapid and precise piercing strikes. He can see a lot of applications already. You can fire continuously if you only use a fraction of the energy you gathered, Kairotsu continued. The small energy ball on his finger flared to life, and with a swift motion, he unleashed a rapid succession of Dodone rays, each discharge puncturing the ground with miniature smoldering craters. Ajax nodded, a hand resting on his chin. A zombie and stream of yellow energy. We should move this charge rifle instead.
No, we're not. And I'm not a zombie.
Say, can you pee out a Dodone ray?
No.
6 months after Raditz's arrival. Ajax collapsed onto the ground in exhaustion, rivulets of sweat tracing a path down his furrowed forehead as he panted heavily on all fours. Holy shit. That's draining as hell. Yes, the Kikaho is not a technique you can use frequently. It drains your life energy, and overusing it will be fatal. Tien acknowledged, folding his arms. And that's why the attack must only be fired briefly, right? Tien nodded in agreement. Precisely. For a beam struggle, the Kamehameha would be the superior choice as it gives you the ability to continuously accumulate energy to ramp up its output even after firing it. You can also sustain it for a longer duration with almost no drawback. However, its weakness is that it requires some preparation time to initiate, and when fired with minimal charge time, it's relatively lackluster. Ajax completed the thought. And in contrast, the Kikaho has almost no charge time and hits about as hard as a well-charged Kamehameha, but it has ridiculously high energy requirements and you cannot change the output after firing it. Yes. The Kikaho is a high-risk, high-reward technique. But I need to warn you again, if you use the Kikaho for a prolonged beam clash, you will die from the drain before you can win said struggle. Taking a seat, Ajax retrieved a notebook, contemplating, so use the Kikaho if you have no time to charge and need to hit the other guy as fast as you can, as hard as you can.
Exactly.
Got it, please teach me the multiform technique next. Ajax said with a mischievous grin, looking up from his notebook. Tien sighed, a hint of amusement in his expression. God, you're insatiable. 8 months after Raditz's arrival. You've got it. That's the essence of telepathy. Now, just practice. Cami, maintaining the telepathic connection, seated himself on a chair he magicked into existence out of thin air, nonchalantly chomping on a sunbae cracker. Cool. Can I try the external key control you've consistently applied to me next? You know, the alternative ki. Ajax continued the mental conversation. I believe you've grasped enough of the fundamentals to give it a shot. It's not too dissimilar from the multiform technique you're trying to learn from young Tien Shinhan. Cami spoke out loud, his voice slightly muffled due to his mouth stuffed full of sunbae crackers. Unlike the multiform technique, just maintain your ki as energy instead of a physical form, and infuse your intent into it rather than allowing it to separate as an independent consciousness. To Ajax's slight annoyance, Cami stopped after that explanation, choosing to leave it at those rather cryptic instructions. In the resulting silence, the only audible sounds were the crisp crunch of sunbae crackers and the faint screams of other Z-fighters training under Mr. Popo in the distance. That's all? You know, you weren't like this when we first arrived here. You seemed much more legendary, mysterious, and wise. With unimpressed, half-lidded eyes, Cami wordlessly retrieved the staff resting beside his chair and deliberately tapped it against the floor. Instantly, a sudden paralysis gripped Ajax's body as the atmosphere surrounding him became as dense as stone. Undeterred, Ajax summoned a burst of ki, his muscles flexing and veins pulsing as he gradually began to move inch by inch against the invisible restraint that bound him. Look, I can move. I gotta be grunt good enough to use the time chamber now. Nice try, young Ajax. 10 months after Raditz's arrival. Ajax examined the yellow disk of spinning energy hovering in his hands, a slight frown creasing his brow before shifting his gaze to Krillin.
That's it.
Well, I'm sorry if my Kienzan doesn't live up to your lofty standards of difficulty. Chapter 31, Preparation for War.
11 months, 1 week after Raditz.
Upon the lookout, Ajax sat in a cross-legged position, levitating above the smooth marble tiles across from Cami, who had assumed the same meditative position. Their levitation, however, was not a conventional ki technique. Instead, they had both saturated the air beneath them with their respective ki, imbuing it with an incredible density that allowed them to rest upon the very air itself. Every so often, one of them would wobble, with Ajax teetering notably more compared to Cami. At first glance, it might seem as though the student-mentor pair were engaged in tranquil meditation. However, beneath this serene exterior, an intricate and invisible battle unfolded, a dynamic war for dominion over the airspace that enveloped each of them. Unseen tendrils of ki extend between them, subtly infiltrating the other's fortified air block to compromise its integrity while safeguarding their own. Ajax, clenching his jaw at the strain of his efforts, found himself on the defensive as he valiantly fought off Cami's relentless advances. Despite his best efforts, Cami's tendrils snaked through the air with an unparalleled finesse, and slowly, Ajax's defenses began to crumble under the pressure. Throughout this intense struggle, Cami sat with a casual elegance, a light smile on his lips as he rested his chin on his fist. Finally, a startled yelp escaped Ajax as his control slipped through his grasp and he fell for a few feet, landing unceremoniously on his ass with a resounding plop. He scowled in frustration, marking another entry in his mental ledger of defeats.
Damn it! I still can't come close to matching you.
Cami laughed at the exclamation. Gracefully, he rose from his seated position, and with a subtle flourish, his staff obediently levitated into his grasp.
A wry smile adorned his lips at his disheveled apprentice.
Well, that's to be expected. Although you've displayed considerable skill, it's merely been a little over a month since you embarked on your journey of mastering external ki control. And you'll find, my disciple, that achieving mastery and being merely skilled are two very different accomplishments.
Ajax scrunched up his face, dissatisfaction written across it.
Cami observed his protégé with a knowing smile. This was a familiar expression that Ajax had used often, and over the course of time, Cami had come to recognize this particular look as a manifestation of Ajax's inherent competitiveness. It's a trait that, while not inherently negative, proved to be an energy-consuming one, for him as a mentor that is.
Cami composed his thoughts, preparing to pinpoint areas for improvement and offer guidance on Ajax's missteps.
However, he halted mid-word, the advice freezing on the tip of his tongue. His mouth, initially opening to address Ajax, snapped shut, and his eyes widened in shock and alarm. The subtle furrow of Ajax's brow mirrored the question marks that seemed to dance in the air around him as he tilted his head.
He doesn't like that expression of shock on Cami.
It was an expression Ajax had never witnessed before, at least not from Cami, and this realization heightened his sense of unease. In fact, it surpassed just shock. There was a palpable air of alarm around Cami. Ajax felt his stomach drop as a myriad of thoughts raced through his mind like fleeting shadows.
What happened?
Did Juandi?
Did one of the Z fighters die? Goku can't be wished back?
Then, before Ajax's eyes, the tranquil sky above the lookout underwent a surreal transformation, plunging from a serene azure into a stormy darkness.
That's odd.
It was still daytime, and the lookout was above both the clouds and any obstruction that could obscure the sunlight. A split second later, a foreboding realization struck Ajax with the force of a thunderclap.
Oh no.
A vivid memory flashed in his mind, an echo from the past. The majestic silhouette of an emerald dragon twisting and weaving through the clouds. Genuine panic seized Ajax as the pieces fell into place with an unsettling clarity. Ajax shot up from his once relaxed seated position, a guttural growl on his lips and thoughts flying.
Son of a bitch.
Did someone steal the freaking Dragon Balls? Ajax turned his gaze to Cami, desperate for some insight or information, anything. But Cami showed no signs of registering Ajax's reaction, his gaze vacant and unfocused as he stared into the darkened sky. His typically steady hands clutched the staff with an intensity seldomly seen from the Guardian, and a subtle tremor coursed through him. Ajax nervously swallowed, an instinctive reaction to the uncertainty that hung in the air like a guillotine. If the Dragon Balls were off the table, then they are in some deep, deep shit. Without Goku here to face Vegeta, it would be an automatic game over. No one except Goku could remotely take on Vegeta when the Prince of all Saiyans is fresh and unscathed. However, not all hope is lost. As a final gambit, they can still turn to fortune-teller Baba, who can work her magic and revive Goku for a day. Ajax's mind whirred with possibilities. The only thing he could reasonably be certain of is that the Saiyans had not yet arrived on Earth. It had not been a year since Raditz's arrival, 3 more weeks remained to be precise, which afforded them a narrow window to plan their next move. King Kai just relayed to me that the Saiyans are due to arrive within 20 minutes. Cami's solemn shattered Ajax's racing thoughts, jolting him back to reality. F***ck. A visceral expletive blasted within Ajax's mind. Why had they arrived ahead of schedule? Had unforeseen events created a deviation in the timeline, or was this, oh shit, it might have been canon? Unhelpfully, only now did Ajax remember that Goku took 6 months to reach King Kai and trained for 5 more before returning. The stark reality had slapped Ajax square in the face with the gaps in his knowledge, gaps that now threatened to jeopardize his preparations. Ajax greatly regrets not delving into the intricate details of the canon more thoroughly in his past life. The assumption that the Saiyans would adhere to the established 1-year timeframe had proven to be a costly oversight. There was no sugarcoating it. He kept up when the stakes were high, and Ajax keenly felt the butterflies in his stomach turning to lead at this informational blind spot, feeling like a contestant chef, up for elimination, presenting raw meat to Gordon Ramsay himself. A chill swept across Ajax's face as he made another sobering realization. One of the key objectives of the master plan had been to relay a warning to King Kai through Cami, urging Goku to return a day early to guarantee his presence for the impending invasion. However, with the Saiyans arriving in 20 and Goku still absent, Ajax's frustration boiled over, finding a voice in his exclamation, "Damn it! What on God's green earth made King Kai think that a mere 20 minutes notice was a good idea? Where's Goku at the moment? And what about the Dragon Balls?" "He's en route on the Snake Way," Cami began to pace, the gravity of the situation weighing on him. King Kai mentioned that Goku had a rather ingenious idea of timing his revival as closely as possible to the Saiyans' arrival. This way, he'll regain his stamina closer to the critical moment. Ajax nodded in approval of the plan. It was uncharacteristic of Goku, but he could appreciate the foresight and ingenuity of the decision. As far as last-minute plans go, it was indeed rather brilliant. Reviving closer to the end of the Snake Way meant Goku wouldn't need to concern himself with stamina until that crucial moment, since he'd be in peak condition when Shenron resurrects him. At the moment, young Bulma is utilizing the Dragon Balls she had pre-collected to revive Goku, Cami added, returning from Ajax's other side after completing a brief lap in his pacing. A wave of relief swept over Ajax, as a fraction of the tension released its hold on him with this reassuring development. Okay, Goku will be an active participant in the fight. That's good. That's very good. The resolute clenching of Ajax's jaw eased, and he drew a series of deep breaths to steady his racing thoughts. He needed to think strategically. How could he adapt to this situation and gain an advantage? What adjustments could be made to his battle strategy? What recourse does he have within the master plan to account for this change? Suddenly, Ajax jolted as a spark of inspiration ignited within him. Well, what do you know, Goku does have an untapped resource that could be more strategically deployed. Send Nimbus to him. Cami blinked in surprise at Ajax's sudden suggestion, causing a momentary pause in his pacing as he processed the words. What? Get Nimbus from Korin, teleport to the closest you can get to Goku, then send Nimbus to meet him halfway. He can ride it back and be all the faster for it. Cami's expression lit up, nodding in approval at the astuteness of the suggestion. Goku is currently around 5 hours away, and this might reduce that time while simultaneously conserving his stamina even more. Well done, excellent idea. Without a moment's hesitation, Cami vanished, presumably employing his authority as the guardian of Earth to swiftly teleport to the afterlife. Or Korin. At least, that's what Ajax assumed. In the wake of Cami's sudden departure, the heavens themselves appeared to react. Moments later, the foreboding darkness shrouding the lookout dispersed, unveiling a clear blue sky once more. It seemed the Dragon Balls had once again scattered across the world. With purpose, Ajax turned, his attention now set on the horizon beyond the lookout. Time was of the essence, and Korin's tower beckoned to him. Senzu beans awaited him there after all, and they will be critical resources for the impending battle. Hey! Ajax twisted his head towards Mr. Popo, who stood a few feet away. Call Mr. Popo what you will, but his disturbing antics had trained Ajax to be extremely aware of his surroundings. Ajax had sensed Mr. Popo's presence the instant he materialized out of thin air, and as he'd expected, the now familiar figure showed nothing more than neutral stoicism. It was an attitude Ajax had grown accustomed to over the past year. Cami had intended to do this before you would depart, but the urgency had caused him to forget, Mr. Popo spoke in his characteristical tone, for once not intimidating. Raising his hands, Mr. Popo shot out a beam of something with a speed that caught Ajax off guard. Before Ajax could react, the beam made contact, creating a momentary flash that enveloped him. Ajax flinched instinctively, bracing for the effect of the attack. Rather anticlimactically, Ajax's crimson GI merely became as light as regular clothing and turned impeccably pristine, as if freshly ironed. Well, that was an embarrassing reaction. To be honest, he had forgotten his clothes and surroundings had been weighed at all.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Popo.
You're welcome, Dirt, Mr. Popo replied. His eyes then narrowed, his usual air of menace enveloping his presence. You are now representing Cami and the Lookout.
Do not disgrace us.
With that final ominous warning, Mr. Popo's form dissipated into nothing, leaving only a lingering sense of his presence. And with that, the Lookout became devoid of its inhabitants, becoming eerily silent. Ajax's brow twisted in confusion at Mr. Popo's cryptic words. Represent? A quick examination of his attire revealed no discernible changes, and the turtle symbol, the emblem that had become synonymous with his martial arts journey until a year ago, still adorned his attire in its familiar place over his heart. Nevertheless, Ajax decided to inspect his GI more closely, his gaze tracing the lines of the fabric for subtle alterations. A realization dawned on him as he reached the spot where the prominent turtle symbol had once resided on his back. In its place, the symbol for God now embellished the fabric, a symbol identical to the one Cami himself wore. A light smile graced Ajax's face. How far he has come on his journey, starting from an absolute nobody with no knowledge of martial arts to this moment in time, where he is carrying Cami's symbol into battle. After concluding his examination of his GI, Ajax drew a deep breath. There was one more thing he needed to do. He centered himself and focused on Cami's domain surrounding him. At this point, it was at the same density that forbade him from even breathing almost a year ago. But credit to Cami's incredible skill, even separated by an entire dimension, the airspace surrounding him remained dense and under his mentor's complete control. However, this was no longer the time for training. Ajax's hand sliced through the air in a horizontal curved arc in a singular motion, resembling a katana during a quick draw. Instantly, the dense aura of stone cocooning him shattered like fragile glass, dispersing into the atmosphere. The airspace around him shifted, reverting to the natural density of air. For the first time in 11 months, Ajax was unhindered by external influences. Ajax flexed his hands. This sense of liberation was invigorating, and he felt incredibly powerful. He was finally unchained. He can finally understand what Kefla experienced when she first came into existence, fresh from her fusion. Silently, Ajax launched himself from the Lookout, his form a blur as he plummeted with blistering speed. As the wind roared past him and the Lookout receded into the distance above him, the distinctive form of Corinne's tower emerged, drawing closer with remarkable speed. Ajax's descent concluded in a precise and abrupt halt right before Corinne, causing a gust of wind to ripple around him, the aftermath of the kinetic energy from his arrival. Corinne squinted in response to the unexpected arrival, his feline features scrunching as the gust of wind from Ajax's arrival ruffled and blew back his fur. The elderly feline instinctively tightened his grip on his cane. Master Corinne, Cami received news that the Saiyans would arrive within 20 minutes, more than 10 minutes ago. I need all the available healing senzu beans that we currently have on hand. Ajax's words rushed forth with a rapid cadence from the urgency. Corinne nodded in understanding and swiftly dashed into his chambers without a moment of hesitation. Corinne could sense Ajax following in pursuit, and their urgent footsteps echoed through the confines of the chamber. In no time, Corinne reappeared from his quarters, cradling 2 senzu beans in his paws. Here. This is all that we have right now. Good luck. Ajax expressed his gratitude with a nod. Perfect. Everything was unfolding flawlessly here as he had planned. In truth, Ajax's decision to provide Goku with Nimbus earlier wasn't solely to hasten Goku's arrival. Rather, it was a calculated move to optimize their limited resources. Through the course of his discussions with Corinne in the past year, Ajax had learned that only 2 senzu beans would be available, exactly as it was in canon. In the original story, Goku had taken a senzu bean to replenish his stamina, leaving just a single bean for Krillin and Gohan to divide between them. By ensuring Nimbus gets to Goku in advance, Ajax eliminates the need for Goku to use a senzu bean for stamina, thus sparing the second one for the Z fighters. Having 2 senzu beans at their disposal instead of just one is an invaluable advantage for the upcoming battle. It goes without saying, but the difference of having just one more senzu bean could sometimes change absolutely everything. Ajax, who had readied himself to depart and confront the imminent threat, coincidentally happened to catch a glimpse of Yajirobe crouching in the corner. It was a sight that immediately captured his attention and also something that he, embarrassingly, had failed to notice upon his initial arrival. A bit ironic, considering he had been mentally hyping himself up about his heightened awareness thanks to Mr. Popo. As Ajax's eyes settled on the quivering figure, a sinking suspicion took root within him regarding the situation. "You're not coming?" In response, Yajirobe could only manage a nervous chuckle, a feeble attempt to downplay the circumstances. "You got it though, right? Are you being serious right now?" Ajax's expression mirrored the incredulity in his words. "You spent nearly a whole year training with Cami only to sit this out when the time comes? I don't need to go, I hardly matter at all. All of you are far stronger than me. That's not an excuse. We're the last line of def." Ajax's mouth snapped shut mid-word as he sensed a titanic energy signature descending in the far distance. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Corinne's face turning grim. If he wasn't the only person to sense the key, then it could only mean Vegeta had arrived. Damn it, he's out of time. On the other hand, Yajirobe's fear intensified with the emergence of the energy signature. He began retreating from Ajax, stepping backward with wide-eyed terror etched across his face. "I can't face that. Oh God. Oh God. How can anyone be this strong?" "Ajax," Corinne interjected, tapping Ajax's shoulder with his cane to grab his attention. "If Yajirobe is terrified to this extent, then he won't be of any help. He'll just be a hindrance to you all." Ajax glanced at Corinne before shifting his gaze to Yajirobe, who had retreated to the banister, his knees trembling with fear. It was evident that Yajirobe had no intention of leaving. Ajax's expression soured with disappointment and a touch of disdain. "I had thought you were a better man. Not everyone is fearless like you, okay? I might have gone if you weren't there." Ajax doesn't have the time for this pointless argument nor the patience for Yajirobe's justifications. Yajirobe can delude himself however he pleases to make himself feel better. Whatever his reasoning may be, Ajax wanted no part in it. Without uttering another word to the swordsman, Ajax expressed gratitude to Corinne once more and leaped off Corinne's tower. It appears Yajirobe is no longer a viable strategic asset for the purposes of severing Vegeta's tail. Unfortunately, this meant that a crucial component of his battle plan was missing, rendering that aspect of his strategy null and void. He'll have to adjust his overall battle strategy to account for this setback. He needs to think of a new plan to deal with Great Ape Vegeta, and he needs to think of it fast. Gritting his teeth, Ajax propelled himself forward with his utmost speed, rapidly distancing himself from Corinne's tower and Cami's lookout. As Ajax raced against time, the wind and the landscape rushed past him as he surged towards the heart of the continent. Nappa and Vegeta awaited, and with them is the battle where the fate of the Earth would be decided. The Saiyan invasion had finally begun. Chapter 32, It's a bird, it's a plane, it's an invasion. 20 minutes prior, East City. "Daddy, can we go get some hamburgers?" Erasun looked down at his bright-eyed 5-year-old daughter. He had been dragging her around East City all day, thanks to an unexpected news story that the station urgently summoned him to cover. He adored his daughter to bits, and her innocence had always brought him respite from the chaos that consumes his day, every day. And because of that innocence, there were moments when he felt his high-profile career was a curse. Just because he's the most successful reporter in the station, doesn't mean that he has to cover every single hot story out there. Sometimes, the investors and news director forget that he is a father too. This time around, a team of scientists supposedly made a groundbreaking discovery. According to their findings, 2 high-velocity celestial objects were approaching Earth, moving at a speed far surpassing that of any known celestial bodies. What captured the scientific community's attention was not just the speed of these objects, but their uncanny ability to navigate through space with remarkable precision. Unlike typical celestial bodies, these entities deftly maneuvered around other cosmic objects and navigated asteroid belts as if they possessed advanced spatial awareness. Given the unknown objects' intentional avoidance of obstacles, the scientists theorized that these objects might be spaceships. Erasun sighed. It was a ridiculous story, likely a ploy made in desperation for funding or for their 15 minutes of fame. After all, how likely was extraterrestrial life? Wacky as the life forms on Earth are, as far as the scientific community is aware, all of them originated here on Earth. To further hammer the nail in the coffin, no previous efforts by the scientific community had detected any sign of extraterrestrial lifeforms. In the end, as he had anticipated, the UFOs did not land at the predicted site even well beyond the estimated time. His trip to the station had been an utter waste of time.
and on his daughter's birthday too. Erasun suddenly snapped out of his thoughts, realizing he had been spacing out. His daughter, like the little sweetheart she was, had waited patiently for his response the entire time by his side. His eyes gently shifted to his daughter, and in the sunlight, she looked like a fairy with her blonde hair shimmering, a trait she undoubtedly inherited from him. A subtle, affectionate smile tugged at the corners of Erasun's lips. Today was meant to be her birthday celebration, and yet, not once had she complained. A twinge of guilt tugged at his heart. He really didn't think he deserved such a patient and understanding daughter, and he silently vowed to make it up to her. He will transform the rest of this day into a special one that she deserves. Of course, Cupcake. It's about time for lunch, isn't it? We can go wherever you want. Erasun's gaze dropped to his watch, the time displaying 11:43. In the future, he would swear that this mundane act was what allowed him to survive the events of this day, the day that changed the trajectory of his life forever. However, Erasun was mistaken. The mere act of looking down at his watch was not why he survived. Unbeknownst to all except Ajax, in another world at this precise time, the entirety of East City would have met its end, callously obliterated by the cruelty of Earth's invaders. In this world, at this time, a single man's resolve had changed the fate of an entire city. But Erasun wouldn't know that. As Erasun glanced at his watch, he caught an unexpected glint, a peculiar reflection of two red-hot somethings. He snapped his head up, his gaze quickly locating and focusing on the objects. He gaped at them. No way. Were those the... Erasun's eyes tracked the descent of two round objects as they pierced through the sky, glowing red from the astronomical speed of their atmospheric entry. His fascination quickly gave way to horror as he mentally estimated the impact zone given their trajectory. These objects, whatever they were going to land in their near vicinity, and he had no faith in these objects to slow down. He needs to get his daughter out of the epicenter of impact now. In a split-second decision fueled by adrenaline and instinct, Erasun reached down, scooped up his daughter, and sprinted into the road, putting as much distance as possible between them and the towering building they had stood before. His heart pounded with fear as he glanced back, witnessing the two objects crash mercilessly straight through the skyscraper at terminal velocity. Though collisions slowed their speed slightly, the momentum of the objects was still immense. They impacted the ground a few blocks away, creating a minor, localized earthquake that reverberated through the streets. Erasun, still clutching his daughter tightly, tumbled to the ground with her as the ground shook beneath them. The impact on the pavement was harsh, leaving his head ringing and his senses utterly disoriented. He couldn't even be certain if he shielded his daughter from the fall or if they had both hit the ground hard. All he could register were the sound of others' panic screams as those who could, fled from the destruction. Pandemonium. Everything was utter pandemonium. In the chaotic aftermath, Erasun had little time to ensure his daughter's well-being. There were more imminent threats demanding his attention. Acting on pure instinct, he covered his daughter, using his own body as a protective shield, and tightly closed his eyes. Moments later, an enormous cloud of dust erupted outward from the collapsing building, enveloping them in a thick layer of ash and destruction as rubble of various sizes descended around them like rain. He was never one to believe in God, but at that moment, he fervently prayed to Cami that his body would be strong enough to protect his daughter. At the same time, the landing site. Within the newly formed crater, the two alien pods, still aglow with heat from their fiery impact, distinctly hissed as their doors creaked open. Emerging from the shadowy interiors were two-tailed warriors, their appendages quickly wrapping around their waists with practiced ease. They walked forth, uncaring of the swirling dust that clung to them or the red-hot earth beneath them. One of the warriors commanded attention with a remarkable height that surpassed even those of already imposing stature. The other, shorter in stature but exuding an air of undeniable authority, confidently took the lead and demonstrated without a shadow of a doubt who was in charge. His eyes, cold and analytical, scanned the surroundings without a hint of mercy. Nappa and Vegeta had officially arrived on Earth. Clear your ship logs, Nappa, and sever all external communications. Frieza doesn't need to be privy to our movements. Aye. With a deft click on his scouter, Nappa mirrored Vegeta's actions, ensuring a complete blackout in communication. This was a covert operation, and having that tyrant, of all people, on high alert was an unnecessary risk that neither Vegeta nor Nappa could afford. Having swiftly executed the task, Nappa ascended into the air alongside Vegeta, scanning the obscured surroundings. He waved his hand before his face to disperse lingering dust and tried to squint through the residual haze. He couldn't see much, but his scouter certainly could. His trusty machine beeped as its digital readout displayed the power levels of the natives that surrounded them. So, these are the people who are genetically compatible with us, huh? Not too impressive, to be honest, Nappa remarked, his face clearly showing his disappointment as he scanned the numbers displayed on the screen. The vast majority of their power levels don't even exceed 10. Even with extremely lax standards, this reading is just. He trailed off, disheartened. Utterly pathetic, Vegeta interjected, his arms crossed in disdain and a disgusted sneer on his face. Such a worthless race would only serve to muddy the Saiyan blood. What was Raditz thinking? Well, okay, let's not be so hasty, Vegeta. The average Saiyan wasn't exactly all that impressive either. Besides, considering that they were able to take down Raditz, I don't think they're all useless. Perhaps there are a few gems amongst them. Vegeta blinked slowly, considering the point Nappa had raised. As he contemplated, his gaze naturally drifted toward the aftermath of their destructive entrance. Even amidst the countless expressions of fear and dismay, Vegeta's sharp instincts guided him to lock eyes with a particular blonde native, whose hateful glare pierced through the chaotic scene. Despite the rubble around it, the native appeared unharmed, cradling a blonde runt. Presumably its offspring, who apparently sustained a nasty head injury. Vegeta arched an eyebrow, amused by the intensity of the hatred emanating from the native's eyes. It was the only one who had the backbone to show killing intent even as all the other sheep wailed in fear. How interesting. Perhaps there were some hidden gems amongst them after all. There may be some truth to that. Very well, I will permit them to live a little longer. At least until we have the Dragon Balls in our hands. To Vegeta's annoyance, Nappa proceeded to lean into his personal space with a demeanor not unlike some grade schooler about to reveal the juiciest piece of playground gossip. Embarrassing. Nappa should grow the hell up. Want me to destroy the city? Nappa offered with a grin, garnishing the statement with an exaggerated wink. I can probably take out all these ants with a single attack. Did I not just say I will permit them to live a little longer? Vegeta shot Nappa a narrowed-eyed look, a silent reprimand at the suggestion of wanton destruction. We're here to find the Dragon Balls, not to show off the size of your dick. Ha! Well, considering we're also contemplating potentially rebuilding the Saiyan race here, I'd say we're here precisely to wave those bad boys around. Just shut the F***ck up, Nappa. Okie. Silence descended upon the two Saiyans as their conversation reached its natural conclusion. To fill the void until their scouters delivered a reading, they meandered towards the undamaged parts of the city, soaring high above, and from their elevated vantage point, they observed the native inhabitants. As they drifted off, the sounds of chaos gradually faded into the background, replaced by the beeping of their scouters as they diligently worked to detect any significant energy signatures. Damn, I'm getting a bit hungry from that trip. You think they have any good food on this planet? Nappa started to nudge at Vegeta playfully, breaking the silence once more. The Prince of all Saiyans sighed, wearing a put-upon expression that had become a familiar sight whenever Nappa was around him. It was a look of annoyance and resigned tolerance, an expression Vegeta had perfected through countless interactions with his rather boisterous subordinate. Man, that reminds me of that purple fruit vine thing from planet Helheim a while back. Nappa continued, undeterred by Vegeta's stoic silence. From experience, Nappa knew that Vegeta would respond if he stayed patient and continued talking for long enough. After all, he was the pioneer and leading authority on the art of needling Vegeta into responding. It was a skill he had proudly honed over decades of trial and error in attempting to get the Saiyan Prince to lighten up. And what can he say? He's a master of his craft. Vegeta, in turn, rolled his eyes at Nappa's persistence. Everything reminds you of that damn fruit because you never shut up about it. What do you mean? It was the best fruit I've ever had. Nappa chuckled heartily at Vegeta's remark with an unapologetic grin. As if on cue, Nappa's stomach interjected with a thunderous rumble. Oh damn, I'm really hungry. You're always hungry, Nappa. Too bad none of the nutrients goes to your brain. Nappa, however, took the jab in stride, responding with a hearty laugh. Haha. Who needs one of those when you got some of these bad boys? Nappa started to flex his biceps proudly. Yes, all that and still a dumbass. You're lucky I've known you for so long because anyone else this annoying would be vaporized. Hey, you know you love me and my handsome mug, Vegeta. And because he knew his prince would be irked by it, Nappa inched closer, mercilessly invading Vegeta's personal space with the audacity only a long-time companion could have. I doubt even your mother would love your face, Vegeta shot back. Then, visibly disgusted by the proximity of Nappa's face to his own, he shoved Nappa's face away with a single hand. The considerable force of the push sent the larger Saiyan drifting back a few feet. Before Nappa could unleash one of his trademark quips,
their scouters crackled to life, having successfully detected the presence of multiple significant power levels. Nappa shot an eye at the screen, scanning the readings of the estimated direction and distance of the energy signatures. Hey, Vegeta. I'm getting a few readings on some decent power levels. You getting them too? What do you think? Vegeta swiftly checked the data on his scouter. A thoughtful expression crossed his face as he processed the information. Quite a few over 1,000. They're likely the ones who took down Raditz. We needed more information anyways, let's go. The two Saiyans launched themselves through the sky, their departure marked by a sonic boom that rippled through the air. The resulting shockwaves shattered windows in nearby skyscrapers, sending shards of glass cascading to the ground below. With that as their farewell, the Saiyans left East City for destination unknown. The city's denizens affected by the sonic boom grumbled, some rubbing their ears, some moving on with their daily routine, some excitedly posting about the experience, but none had any idea of just how lucky they were to survive this encounter. In many, many other worlds, they didn't. Chapter 33, Gathering the Gang. 5 minutes before the Saiyans' arrival, border of wasteland. Piccolo unleashed a rapid barrage of punches, his fists a green blur as they collided with Gohan's outstretched arms. The force of each impact pierced through the young boy, causing him to stagger under Piccolo's physical strength, and leaving him vulnerable for just a fleeting moment. Without hesitation, Piccolo's next strike snaked through Gohan's guard, finding its mark with Gohan's gut in a solid, resonant thud. A sharp wheeze escaped Gohan's lips, forced out by the impact of the strike. His breath caught in his throat, leaving him gasping for air that stubbornly refused to fill his lungs. Gohan stumbled and doubled over, hands instinctively finding support on his knees. In this vulnerable stance, Gohan extended a hand outward, a silent request to momentarily pause the sparring session. Piccolo paused in his follow-up strike, deeply frowning at Gohan's action. To Gohan's credit, his improvements throughout their training had been tremendous, and Piccolo can hardly remember the whiny, annoying brat of yesteryear. However, instances like this emphasized to Piccolo that Gohan was still not ready. He's just too naive. Though this is a sparring session, the impending battle against the Saiyans will not be. The Saiyans will not be kind enough to grant moments of respite simply because Gohan's breath was momentarily taken away, because what it will be is an unforgiving struggle for survival. A pause is a luxury that will not exist. The increasingly obvious issue with Gohan, Piccolo thinks, is that the boy is just too civilized. He had long noted Gohan's inherent aversion to violence, evident in his preference for a defensive fighting style. While adopting a defensive approach in combat isn't inherently problematic, what is problematic is Gohan's reluctance to seize clear opportunities to go on the offensive. Piccolo cannot emphasize enough how significant of a flaw this is for Gohan. The art of a defensive fighting style goes beyond merely having a solid defense, it also demands a keen recognition of opportune moments to launch devastating counterattacks. In battle, relying solely on defense as Gohan tends to do is nothing more than passivity. At that point, the fight is no longer a fight. It was just a precarious waiting game of when the enemy would finally breach your defenses. Not good enough, Gohan. I understand your desire to fight defensively, but if you choose that path, then you must consistently land counterattacks. Throughout this entire spar, you've launched only 5. Gohan's expression shifted to a saddened frown as he straightened himself back up from his previous doubled-over position, realizing he had disappointed Mr. Piccolo again. I get it, Mr. Piccolo, but you're so much stronger than me. Attacking you doesn't seem to do anything, and I don't want to hurt you. Piccolo, however, narrowed his eyes at Gohan's justification, effortlessly seeing through the excuse. Gohan should know better than to make excuses for his mistakes. He taught him to be better than that. Don't make excuses. And you still haven't fixed your other problem either. When facing a superior opponent, absorbing hits is not an option. A single well-placed strike can be enough to determine the outcome of the entire battle. You must dodge. Piccolo purposefully strode toward Gohan, closing the distance between them. Not one to rely solely on words, Piccolo reinforced his previous points with a swift yet powerful flick to Gohan's head. A sharp snap echoed with the slightly admonishing strike, prompting Gohan to dramatically cover his forehead and collapse onto his back, sprawling out on the dusty ground. Piccolo assumed his signature stance, arms crossed, standing stoically. He watched as Gohan, still prone on the ground, pouted at the flick, his cheeks puffing up like a pufferfish. Then, pretending to be drained of all strength from the strike, Gohan feebly reached for an apple from his snack pile a few steps away. Piccolo rolled his eyes. This brat had been getting too comfortable with him lately, enough to start pushing boundaries, and to this day, he couldn't fathom why on earth he put up with it. With a nonchalant jerk of his hand,
Piccolo harnessed his telekinetic abilities to lift a lone apple from the pile and sent it sailing gracefully into Gohan's outstretched hands. Gohan flashed a genuinely grateful smile, and his hand smoothly delivered the apple to his mouth without a trace of previous weakness. With practiced ease, Gohan took a bite, his eyes squinting into happy slits as he savored the fruit's sweetness. "Are you at least proud of me for the progress I've made so far, Mr. Piccolo?" Gohan said, his mouth stuffed full of apples. "Don't talk when you're chewing. And no, not until you address those issues that I had emphasized to you far too many times." In truth, he is Alra no. Piccolo abruptly silenced his own thoughts. Gohan is here because he is an asset for world domination. Gohan's impressive progress can be attributed to him, the Demon King, being King excellent at teaching. He would rather die than admit anything else to Gohan, or himself for that matter. In the next moment, an eruption of power descended in the distance, cutting off any further conversation and causing Gohan to choke on his apple, the young Saiyan practically coughing his lungs out as the fruit took an impromptu field trip down the wrong pipe. The tranquility of the training session ended in an instant, all playfulness and levity dissipating as Piccolo and Gohan redirected their focus toward the surging power. Piccolo's stoic expression intensified, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the source of the ki. On the other hand, Gohan swiftly sat up, his fear apparent as he trembled at the thought of facing a powerhouse of such magnitude. At this moment, a hand landed reassuringly on Gohan's shoulder, providing a steadying anchor. When Gohan looked up, he saw Piccolo nod, understanding that his mentor was silently conveying that he was not alone. Piccolo managed to maintain his collected expression as Gohan gradually regained composure. However, as Gohan turned away, Piccolo's countenance shifted. A scowl creased his features as he redirected his attention toward the two distant formidable forces, one unmistakably overshadowing the other. Although both adversaries were stronger than he had anticipated, the sheer power of the more imposing one had cast an enormous shadow over his confidence. While he had grown considerably more powerful since his encounter with Raditz, he still felt unease grip him as the enemy so casually flaunted his ki. Piccolo keenly felt the pressure settling on his shoulders. Like what that Ajax brat had told him a year ago, he currently stood as the planet's strongest, so the burden of confronting these overwhelming invaders fell squarely on his shoulders more so than anyone else. That being said, he understood with grim clarity that against that enormous power, presumably Vegeta's, his chances of victory were perilously slim. Piccolo's jaw clenched tightly. "So, this is why Vegeta said it wouldn't make a difference whether we knew when they arrived or not." Narrowing his eyes with steely resolve, Piccolo stretched his senses outward to read the Saiyans' ki through the vast network of ki that crisscrossed the world. "Wait, Gohan. They're headed our way, likely utilizing those scouters that Raditz had. Since they're coming to us, we're going to choose the battlefield." Effortlessly, Piccolo ascended into the air, positioning himself above the terrain. He paused, sensing that Gohan had yet to leave the ground. His gaze refocused on Gohan, who, it turns out, had been busy stuffing handfuls of apples into the pockets of his gi. Piccolo closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and counted to 10. His eyes opened just enough to convey an unimpressed, half-lidded gaze. Freaking Saiyans and their insatiable appetites. He swears to his other half, this kid is going to give him gray hairs, and he doesn't even have any hair. "We won't have the luxury of snacking when we're fighting for our lives, Gohan. Hurry up and follow me." Piccolo asserted his tone firm with a hint of reprimand. In response, Gohan could only manage a sheepish smile in acknowledgement of the scolding. He lifted off the ground, transitioning from a carefree boy stashing snacks to a more serious and determined fighter. And so, the duo took to the skies, their bodies cutting through the air to the fated battlefield, where destiny awaited. Moments later, wasteland. Piccolo and Gohan touched down amidst the rugged expanse of a wasteland. Piccolo's keen eyes scanned the rather familiar surroundings. Vast desolate plains stretched before them, punctuated sporadically by imposing rock formations that jutted upwards from the earth like jagged fangs. The absence of wind rendered the small patches of grass motionless, their blades frozen in time. Even the dirt on the ground remained undisturbed, adding to the eerie stillness of the wasteland. For Piccolo and Gohan, this desolate area was saturated with memories and echoes of countless hours of training. It was a space filled with their tears, sweat, blood, and progress, a crucible for the duo that not only molded their combat edge but also the bond between them. Piccolo and Gohan instinctively tensed as they sensed two additional signatures closing in rapidly, not as colossal as the distant behemoths but formidable nonetheless, and certainly not inferior to what Raditz had demonstrated a year before. Moments later, a figure materialized with blurring speed, ricocheting off a rock pillar before landing gracefully in their midst. It was Krillin, dressed in the iconic Turtle School GI, hands confidently resting on his hips, and a friendly smile adorning his face. Piccolo, Krillin greeted with a respectful nod, acknowledging the Namekian's presence. However, his attention swiftly shifted towards Gohan, who stood beside the former Demon King. A subtle expression of amazement graced Krillin's features as he remarked, "Wow, except for your hair, you look just like your dad when he was your age. Although, Goku certainly wasn't as strong as you are back then." "Hello, Mr. Krillin." Gohan offered a polite greeting in response. Krillin's face immediately lit up with a genuine smile. "Jure Polite. And you know who I am." "Of course. My mom always reminded me to mind my manners." Gohan explained with a shy smile. "And Dad introduced me to everyone about a year ago at Master Roshi's place. Don't you remember?" Krillin, momentarily taken aback, stammered, Why, yeah, of course I do. I'm just surprised you still remember me." Piccolo interjected at this juncture, cutting the conversation off by addressing Krillin. "Hey, another signature is approaching, roughly equal in strength as you. I assume it's another one of your friends." "Yeah, that should be Yamcha," Krillin confirmed, tilting his head as he read the incoming key. True to Krillin's assertion, Yamcha made a rather theatrical entrance, landing with a flair that matched his dramatic style. He nodded casually, a cocky smile playing on his lips, as he greeted those gathered. "Hey everyone. Not late to the party, I'm guessing." Piccolo audibly huffed, unimpressed by Yamcha's ostentatious entrance. What's the point of all that showy bullshit? In a battle, practicality reigned supreme. Piccolo chose to direct his attention on the already much closer presences of Vegeta and Nappa and tuned out Krillin busying himself with the introductions between Yamcha and Gohan. A heavy silence soon draped over the assembled warriors, each pressured by the rapidly approaching signature of the Saiyan threat. Breaking the silence, Yamcha turned to Krillin with a wry grin. "You nervous, buddy?" "Hell yeah, who wouldn't be?" A brief humorless chuckle escaped Krillin. "Well, if it helps, just imagine that you're fighting this battle for your girlfriend. You have to win because that is the only way to reunite with her. Heck, that's my motivation too. I am going to survive this battle and ask Bulma out again." Krillin shot Yamcha a weird look. "Don't jinx it, dude. But you're right, Marin is still waiting for me. I can't afford to lose." Everyone tensed as the key signatures drew alarmingly near, the Saiyan silhouettes becoming visible in the distance. The atmosphere crackled with a combination of nervous energy and actual energy as Piccolo shouted a warning. "Get ready. Here they come." Chapter 34. I'm a what? Part 2. As they closed in on their destination, Nappa observed Vegeta effortlessly slipping into his cold, lofty prince persona in his peripheral vision. It was a characteristic move from Vegeta, a mere shift in demeanor that he had witnessed countless times. Vegeta's disdain for fraternizing with the enemy was well known among the Saiyan ranks and the Frieza force. He had a unique way of treating opponents as if they were utterly beneath him and worth less than nothing. The prince of all Saiyans had mastered the art of emotional detachment, thanks to his preference to view adversaries as little more than non-sentient lifeforms destined for annihilation. For the most part, this approach worked well for Vegeta, as it solidified his reputation as a merciless warrior who approached battles with an unwavering focus and ruthless efficiency. But unlike Vegeta, Nappa operated on a different wavelength. He didn't shy away from fraternizing with the enemy, and in fact, did so often. Though he can't exactly prove it, Nappa harbored a suspicion that Vegeta was, in fact, impressed by his ability to effortlessly transition from shooting the shit with a local in one moment and ruthlessly tearing their heads off without a shred of hesitation in the next. And since this unorthodox behavior of his never truly interfered with their primary objectives, waging war and conquering planets, Vegeta tolerated it. That being said, tolerance and approval are two very different things. Vegeta frequently tells him to cease fraternizing, with varying degrees of force and frustration. Despite these warnings, Nappa never stopped. Now, the real reason why he never stopped, a truth he doesn't dare to share with Vegeta, was because he knew this tendency of his vexes his prince greatly. And for Nappa, any day where he can push Vegeta's buttons and provoke a reaction is a good day. Drawing near to the ragtag group, Nappa adopted his serious persona as well. Fraternizing aside, he did recognize the significance of leaving a strong first impression. Descending with measured precision, he touched down lightly on the ground, maintaining a quiet intensity beside Vegeta, who had descended with an imposing aura of regal authority. Before anyone could utter a word, Yamcha sprang to the forefront of the conversation in his signature blend of bravado and wit, his mouth moving faster than his brain. "I'm sorry, Earth is closed today. Please come back never." "Heh. Nice one, smartass. Nappa chuckled briefly, genuinely amused by Yamcha's jest. It was a rather rare occurrence for any natives to crack jokes. The usual reaction involved a cacophony of screams, pleas for mercy, and desperate footsteps retreating in fear. And trust him, it gets boring after a while. Nappa sized up the small menagerie of individuals standing defiantly before him. 2 midgets, 1 average Joe, and wait, was that a Namekian? Nappa's brow arched in surprise, shooting up into his non-existent hairline. Why the hell did Raditz not report T? Hold up. Wait a minute. Is this who Raditz meant by Big Green? Vegeta let out a dismissive snort through his nose. Incompetent as usual. On the opposing side, Piccolo furrowed his brow in confusion at the unfamiliar word, uncertain if it was some form of insult. However, since he was the subject of their conversation, he stepped forward with an inquiry of his own. What's a Namekian? That's you, dumbass, Vegeta instantly retorted with a disdainful flick of his eyes, his arms crossed impatiently. Don't compare me to Son Goku, Piccolo shot back sharply, his face contorted with a blend of offense and irritation. He glanced down at his hand, clenching and unclenching it as he grappled with the revelation. So I'm a Namekian, who? Nappa watched Piccolo come to terms with the revelation of his newfound identity with a combination of disbelief and an expression best described as what the actual F***ck. What on King Vegeta's second beard is happening on this planet? Why does no one remember their origins here? You think there are some voodoo hijinks going on, Vegeta? Perhaps something in the water? Don't care, came Vegeta's blunt and dismissive reply. Undeterred by Vegeta's lack of interest, Nappa started a meticulous visual examination of Piccolo while scratching his chin. His forehead scrunched up and his eyes squinted in intense concentration, inspecting Piccolo up and down like someone would a particularly challenging Where's Waldo illustration. So, how did one of your kind end up here? Didn't your species become extinct, like, 1,000 or so years ago? The historical records stated the Cold Empire surveyed Namek and found it devoid of all life way back then. No. There's a rogue faction of rebels going around actively fighting against the Frieza force in a few contested areas. Their purported leader is said to be a Namekian, though he has yet to reveal himself. Vegeta turned his head to Nappa with a mix of annoyance and disappointment. You should be aware of this. Were you not at the debrief? Is that the one where I was shitting my brains out because of that damned cookie from Chue? And you had Raditz track me down to ask where the hell I was? Oh, was that the one? Vegeta directed an amused sidelong glance at Nappa. Nappa looked like he had just bitten into a particularly sour fruit, offended that his competence was being questioned due to a digestive apocalypse that was totally not his fault. He crossed his arms, a wounded expression fixed on his visage. He had spent so long on that porcelain throne that he was practically on a first-name basis with the darn thing. To add insult to injury, Raditz, that little shit, had recorded his wails without his knowledge, literally caught him with his pants down after busting in, reported all of it to Vegeta, and had been taunting him with the recording ever since. Amidst his amusement, Vegeta's eyes suddenly narrowed, his sharp intellect connecting the dots with a sudden realization. Wait, Nappa, I believe I've unraveled what's happening here. It's very likely that the Dragon Balls the Namekian alluded to a year ago were none other than the wishing orbs of legend that they are rumored to possess back during the pinnacle of their civilization. Nappa's expression transitioned from that of a wronged puppy to genuine shock, his eyes widening in disbelief. You can't be serious, Vegeta. That's nothing more than a myth from thousands of years ago, nearly lost to time. As far as legends go, it's on the same level as the Super Saiyan. And yet here we are, on a backwater planet at the edge of literal nowhere, staring at a member of a mostly extinct species from the very civilization of the legend we're currently chasing. Vegeta turned to Nappa with a raised eyebrow. Coincidence? Nappa, catching onto the train of thought, responded with a confident smirk. I think not. It appears this planet has more in store for us than we gave it credit for initially. Vegeta's eyes swept over the Z fighters, causing Earth's defenders to tense up. And on that note, we should reinstate Namek back onto the list of planets to conquer. The Namekian's existence suggests that it's worth paying it a visit. Besides Vegeta, Nappa suddenly looked constipated, as if he was attempting to contain something within himself. After a moment of great internal conflict, Nappa chose to voice the thoughts that he had been hesitant to express. So, how did you manage to draw all those conclusions from just recalling my explosive diarrhea? Vegeta closed his eyes, taking a deep breath before exhaling slowly. Just shut the F***ck up, Nappa. Okie. Having achieved the rather rare feat of being told to STFU twice in a single day, Nappa turned his focus to the Namekian to assess his reaction to the revelation. Much to his amusement, all the Z fighters sported comically shocked expressions, clearly overwhelmed by the wave of information that had just washed over them. I swear, every time I meet a new Saiyan, my world gets flipped upside down. Krillin grumbled to himself, though his comment was largely ignored by the rest. While Nappa was still enjoying the Z fighter's flabbergasted looks, the scouter perched over his ear beeped. His eyes swiftly darted to the scouter's screen, processing the incoming data. It appears 2 more power levels will arrive shortly. 2 more battle powers approaching. What do you think, Vegeta? Shall we wait for those 2 to get here? Vegeta took a nonchalant step back, dismissively casting his gaze across the surrounding landscape instead. You deal with it. Weaklings like them aren't worth my time. Do as you please, as long as we secure the Dragon Balls in the end. Alright, let's just hold off until everyone gets here, Nappa replied in a booming voice, intending for everyone to hear his words. As they awaited the arrival of the approaching power levels, Nappa took the opportunity to twist his back, a series of loud cracks resonating through the air. He sighed in relief at the release of tension. Unfortunately, the attack balls adhered to standardized sizes, and while someone of Vegeta's or even Raditz's size can sit comfortably, it is much less pleasant for someone of his stature. After nearly a year of being cooped up in there, finally having the freedom to fully stretch felt invigorating. Completing his stretches, Nappa recollected that he had initially wanted to address the Namekian before being distracted by his scouter. Now is as good a time as any. So, Namekian, you're the one who killed Raditz. Yeah, that's me, Piccolo affirmed, meeting Nappa's eyes with an ever-stoic stare. There was no hint of pride in his voice, only acknowledgement of the role he played in Raditz's fate. You want revenge? Nah, he died as a warrior. You did him dirty at the end with that comment of yours, but you took him down in a fair fight, no dishonor in that, Nappa stated matter-of-factly, with a nonchalant shrug. Us Saiyans usually don't hold grudges when it comes to an honorable death in combat. If we did, our quest for vengeance would literally never end. Piccolo arched an eyebrow at the response. So, this was the individual who had stirred such strong emotions in Raditz? Piccolo wasn't so oblivious as to overlook the fact that Nappa's words had granted Raditz a degree of peace before his demise. He had expected passion or anger, the typical emotions that accompanied those who watched their close ones get murdered. But then again, who is he to assert himself as an expert on Science cultural norms? You did honor your promise and give him a proper burial though, right? Nappa inquired once more. We did, Piccolo affirmed. Nappa, seemingly satisfied with the confirmation, nodded in appreciation. Good. He deserved to have one. Shortly thereafter, Tien and Kairatsu descended to the battlefield with swift and precise movements. Landing beside the Z fighters, they greeted everyone perfunctorily, the majority of their attention clearly on the formidable Saiyan duo. After a momentary silence, Tien directed his question towards the young Gohan. You're Goku's kid, right? Despite the tension, Gohan managed a quick nod in response. His eyes involuntarily and curiously drifted to the distinctive third eye on Tien's forehead, a unique biological feature Gohan had never encountered before. Is Ajax not here yet? Kairatsu inquired, a hint of bewilderment in his words. His gaze swept across the gathered warriors, searching for a familiar face that had yet to make an appearance. He's not the kind to shy away from situations like this, not with the fervor in which he trained. He stayed behind on the lookout for additional training even after we departed, after all. Krillin shook his head. We're in the dark as well, so we don't know what's going on either. He was probably still training on the lookout when he got wind of this. Given that the lookout is on the other side of the continent, he's probably still en route. Tien delivered his comment with a measured sense of certainty. Piccolo wasn't entirely convinced if the brat deserved such confidence. While he could acknowledge that Ajax had a knack for seizing opportunities and formulating plans, he also recognized the rascal's disturbing degree of rationality. After the clash with Raditz, Piccolo had been intrigued by the fearlessness Ajax displayed and had discreetly eavesdropped on the subsequent conversation. Piccolo remains uncertain about the accuracy of Bulma's claim about everyone dancing on the palm of Ajax's hands, as he doesn't know enough about the brat to say much. However, one thing he is certain of is that Ajax had spouted pure bullshit about his ignorance of the special beam cannon being a piercing attack. He isn't sure why Ajax chose to tell such a blatant falsehood to his friends, and he opts not to dwell too deeply on the probably disturbing implications. Right now, the Saiyans are the more pressing threat, and after this, they'll be enemies again, so it will no longer be his concern. That aside, Piccolo recognizes that there is the possibility that, like any strategic thinker, the brat may have assessed the strength of the impending invader and deemed the odds unfavorable. He can totally envision the youngster opting for a strategic retreat rather than confronting the Saiyans head-on. There's a chance he chose to retreat, Piccolo voiced his contemplation aloud. Do not insult the integrity of my pupil's character. He won't buckle from something like this. Tien snapped back, visibly bristling at the insinuation about Ajax. Tien's eyes narrowed as he shot a nasty glare at Piccolo. And don't underestimate him. At that, Nappa clapped his hands loudly, interrupting the conversation. Chapter 35. Who even discovered Saibamen anyways? Alright, looks like everyone is here, Nappa casually announced, his hands coming together in a clap. Though the Z-Fighter's gaze remained warily on the Saiyan intruders, Nappa's abrupt and resonant clap still commanded the undivided attention of the assembled warriors. In an instant, the atmosphere crackled with tension as Earth's defenders realized that the decisive moment was upon them. Introductions. Nappa declared in a booming voice, not unlike that of a drill sergeant's authoritative bellow. This is Prince Vegeta, heir apparent and crown prince of all Saiyans. And I'm Nappa, Commander General of Saiyan Forces, he added, the introduction delivered with crisp precision. The collective gaze of the Z-Fighters shifted between the two Saiyan warriors, sizing them up as adversaries to be reckoned with. Hold on, you're the commander of what exactly? Aren't you two supposed to be the last remaining Saiyans? Are you telling me you command your prince around? Yamcha, using humor to mask his unease, chimed in once again. Nappa's face soured as he heard Vegeta clear his throat behind him, aware that Vegeta was silently laughing at his expense. This smartass was fortunate to taunt him instead of Vegeta, or there would be bits and pieces of him scattered everywhere. Alright smartass, I'll let that one slide, but if you keep running your mouth, you'll be the first to taste the consequences. Immediately after, Nappa raised his hand, a gesture that robbed the Z-Fighters, especially Yamcha, of their chance to respond. Also, please spare us the formalities and do not introduce yourselves to us. We genuinely don't care. We introduced ourselves not out of politeness but to merely inform you who the harbingers of your demise will be. We are the most formidable adversaries you will ever confront in your entire lives, but in contrast, you bunch will be nothing more than another faceless, insignificant group of weaklings to us. A wave of fury swept through the small assembly, fueled by a collective surge of indignation at Nappa's contemptuous words. The Saiyans' dismissal of the Z-Fighters had touched a nerve, awakening their resolve to demonstrate their prowess against their enemies. An audible commotion ensued, a blend of angry murmurs and frustrated gestures. However, Nappa paid no heed to the rising discontent, having weathered far more vehement outbursts on a regular basis. Instead, he calmly raised his hand to his face and pressed a button on his scouter with practiced ease. The device emitted a beep, systematically scanning the assembly, and in an instant, Nappa's gaze was augmented by the scouter's data. Perhaps you think you're all hot shit, but truth be told, you lot are nothing too impressive. The Namekian registers at a decent 2,300, the Triclops at 1,750, and the rest of you hover at or beneath Raditz caliber. Not bad at all for a backwater planet, but not up to snuff when pitted against elites like us. Don't make the same mistake as Raditz, you imbecile, Vegeta rebuked Nappa, his stern voice dripping with annoyance. An aha expression of comprehension illuminated Nappa's face at Vegeta's timely reminder. Oops, looks like he had forgotten to factor that crucial piece of information Raditz had reported to them into his assessment. That's right. These pipsqueaks can raise their power levels above what's detected like geese. These initial readings are probably somewhat misleading, then. With a bright smile adorning his features, Nappa turned to Vegeta with an affirmative thumbs up. Thanks, Vegeta. Vegeta, in contrast, responded to the gesture with his customary disdain. A scornful humph escaped him as he turned his back from the Z-Fighters and strode off in a clear display of their insignificance. A few paces away, Vegeta kicked the ground at a calculated angle, exerting a controlled force that sent a boulder jutting upwards like the fong of an animal. He then settled against the earth, his position a blend of seated and leaning, and closed his eyes in imposing contemplation. Vegeta's dismissive demeanor left Nappa rather exasperated. Alright, I get it. They're not worth your time. I'll take care of it, geez. Nappa turned back to the Z-Fighters, his body language morphing into something rather menacing. Listen closely, you embryos, Nappa declared, his eyes turning sharp and penetrating as they swept over the Z-Fighters. While I see how a sorry lot like you managed to take down Raditz, understand that I am in an entirely different league. Like Vegeta, I too have standards.
You must demonstrate a minimum level of power to even have the honor of fighting me, so we'll play a little game, a preliminary round if you will." With deliberate showmanship, Nappa retrieved a small, inconspicuous tube from his battle armor. The transparent vial contained 6 seeds resembling green peas that rattled around as Nappa displayed it openly. With a dramatic flair, Nappa planted each seed in the wasteland soil below, cheerfully humming a tune that none of the Z fighters recognized. A second vial, filled with a vivid green liquid, emerged from Nappa's armor. As he poured the liquid over freshly sown seeds, the soil rapidly absorbed the substance, and the dirt stirred subtly. "Whoever manages to take out one of these has the glory of fighting a high-class Saiyan warrior." Nappa emphasized his statement by pointing his thumb at himself, a prideful grin illuminating his features like a beacon. "Me." As the seeds Nappa planted continued to nestle into the earth, an unsettling tremor rippled through the soil, an ominous prelude to the awakening of an unknown threat. "Just so you all know, each of these Saibamen boasts the equivalent fighting strength of Raditz." Nappa's voice resonated, a smirk playing on his lips. Basking in the dramatic unveiling, he extended his arms in a triumphant horizontal V, as if presenting the Saibamen as some impressive invention to investors. "Behold, our grunt soldiers, the Saibamen." In response, the Z fighters tensed their bodies and seamlessly assumed their respective combat stances synchronously. Beads of sweat trickled down their faces as they drew in deep breaths at the impending unveiling of their next adversaries. However, in a comical display of mistiming, Nappa found himself pointing enthusiastically at absolutely nothing for an embarrassingly long duration. The resulting awkward silence seemed to stretch into an eternity, causing the smirk on Nappa's face to transition from something brimming with confidence to an exceedingly uncomfortable one as the deafening silence persisted. The earth beneath Nappa remained unresponsive to his dramatic introduction. Though the slight tremors beneath the surface continued, there were no immediate signs of the Saibamen's emergence. The Z fighters exchanged bemused glances and valiantly tried to suppress amused smirks as they witnessed the unintentional comedic results of the Saiyan general's actions. Nappa, growing increasingly awkward, looked down at the ground where he had sown the seeds. A frown creased his forehead as he kicked at the spots, attempting to kickstart the Saibamen into their much-anticipated debut. Under the impacts, the soil responded with greater movements, but there was still no sign of anything happening. King embarrassing. Vegeta's frigid voice echoed from his spot a short distance away, where he remained casually leaning on the upturned boulder. "Could MLA break, Vegeta. I don't know what their malfunction is. This doesn't normally happen." Nappa scratched his head in mild bewilderment and stared down at the ground with great intensity as if his stare alone would magically conjure the Saibamen. He glanced up at the Z fighters with a hint of irritation. "Hold on, I'm having technical difficulties. The soil here must be utter shit." Nappa swiftly retrieved the green liquid once more, this time pouring it generously over the spots where the seeds had been planted. As the additional fluid seeped into the ground, the subtle tremors beneath the surface of the soil intensified as the revitalizing energy seemed to surge through it. But the grand entrance that the Z fighters were promised still did not occur. Amid this interlude, a mental transmission came through the air, catching some of the Z fighters off guard. Ajax's voice resonated within their minds. A telepathic connection spanning vast distances was now established. "Hey guys, I just entered telepathic range," Ajax's words echoed through their consciousness. A momentary pause followed before he continued, "Feel free to disregard if you're in the middle of battle, but I'm on my way. I left Cami's lookout a short while ago, and I've got 2 senzu beans with me. I'll be arriving soon and Goku will be a few hours after me." "So, you didn't run after all, brat," Piccolo's voice echoed with a subtle undertone of gruffness. Ajax shot back at the speed of lightning with a wit he didn't know he had. "Shut it, Piccolo Jr. I've got 3 years on you, so you're the real brat here." Among the Z fighters, Krillin stifled a silent snicker at the comeback, while Yamcha's amusement was much less silent. In the background, Tien rolled all 3 of his eyes in exasperation at his pupil's words. But Piccolo, on the other hand, was not amused. "You've gotten cocky, you little shit. How about you say that to my face?" Ajax chose to outright ignore the great Demon King, to Piccolo's immense ire. "So, what's happening over there?" "Nothing so far. The larger Saiyan, Nappa, planted some seeds in the ground for these things called Saibamen, but nothing is happening yet." Krillin swiftly relayed the developing situation. Ajax nodded at the information. Nice. Fortunately, he had managed to establish communications before anything of note happened. This stroke of luck gave him the opportunity to issue some carefully worded warnings about the upcoming battle that he hoped could make a strategic difference. Yamcha, for one,
could significantly improve his contributions in the battle compared to his rather underwhelming performance in canon. Fixing that is a simple matter. Listen up, everyone. These things are completely alien to us, so we're entirely in the dark about them and their abilities. Be careful. For all we know, they might even explode upon death, so stay on your guard until you're absolutely certain they're defeated. A murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the mental network as the Z fighters responded to Ajax's warning with collective understanding. Despite the consensus, Ajax remained dissatisfied. He had issued this warning for a specific someone after all, and this individual's track record in the canon was less than impressive. Time to call someone out. I'm talking to you, Yamcha. You've been getting too confident lately. Come on, get off me, man. I'll be careful. Trust me, I got this. Yamcha swiftly reassured. Nope, Ajax does not trust those words at all. I swear to God, Yamcha, if you die before I arrive, I will kill you myself. Ajax's patience wore thin as he growled his warning through the telepathic link. To everyone else, none of you are allowed to die either. If you get killed, walk it off. Good luck. Ajax heard a startled laugh burst from Krillin before he severed the connection. It was a strategic move because once the Saibamen emerged, they wouldn't have the focus to maintain a telepathic conversation. Besides, it's not like he can see or hear what's happening through a telepathic link anyway. Ajax squinted his eyes as he accelerated even more through the air, tightening his grip on the two senzu beans in his hands. He had provided as much warning as he could without sounding like he knew more than he was letting on. If Yamcha dies again even with that explicit warning, then it's freaking fate. Ajax's thoughts turned to his upcoming objectives in the impending battle. For now they were relatively straightforward. Keep everyone who's alive in the canon alive, keep Gohan alive, thanks Chi-Chi, and of course keep himself alive. Fairly simple, yeah? Well, there are more objectives than just those, but he can address them as they become relevant and as the circumstances evolve. For now, this is enough. The master plan. Keep everyone who's alive in canon alive, pending. Keep Gohan alive, added, pending. Stay alive, pending. Stern, Stern, Stern. Following the telepathic exchange, the Z fighters refocused on Nappa, who had been standing with crossed arms the entire time, tapping his foot impatiently. The Saibamen's bulbous heads, marked by veins and grotesque features, sluggishly surfaced from the soil, progressing about as fast as grass. Amidst this, Yamcha capitalized on the moment for a swift strategic meeting. Leaning in toward the others and creating a miniature huddle, he whispered his suggestion. Shouldn't we strike now so we can get an advantage? Unfortunately, Yamcha's whispered suggestion did not go unnoticed by Nappa. If you pull that move, smartass, I'll kill you. Nappa gave a steely look, a growl punctuating his threat. Nappa spread his gaze from Yamcha to the collective assembly of Z fighters, and his tone noticeably softened. To the rest of you, thank you for your patience. Your honor is noted, but whichever one of you shitstains decided that a wasteland was a brilliant battlefield deserves to die a most painful death. Piccolo turned to the side with a smirk, and Nappa narrowed his eyes at the Namekian, having identified the culprit. And so, they waited. Fortunately, the wait was relatively brief because it appeared that the Saibamen had hit some critical point. The earth beneath them quivered, and with an explosive burst, they emerged from the ground, dripping with mysterious fluids that glistened under the sunlight. Hunched over, they radiated an aura of malevolence as their saliva oozed out from their hideous smiles. As the saliva made contact with the ground, it sizzled, sending a shiver down the Z fighters' spines. Nappa threw up his hands in a gesture that said, finally. Gohan, the youngest of those gathered, involuntarily took a step back, unable to suppress his shiver. He felt fear as the image of the disgusting beings reflected in his eyes. Yamcha, however, was much less reserved as he hissed his reaction. Yo, what in the F***ck are those? The Saibamen, standing in eerie unity, seemed to revel in the attention they garnered. However, one of the six suddenly broke away from the collective. With startling suddenness, this particular Saibaman started a quick and snappy dance, its movements oddly rhythmic and choreographed. Its body twisted and turned with an unnatural fluidity, its performance reaching a climax as it concluded in a heroic pose, where it froze in place with a strangely composed and serious look on its face. It stood exceedingly out of place amongst its 5 brothers who continued to snarl like beasts. The Z fighters, witnessing this strange spectacle, exchanged perplexed glances. Ajax was 1000% right. These creatures were entirely alien and none of them remotely knew if this bizarre behavior was the norm. For all they know, this could be a mating dance. Nappa, who had moments ago shown relief at finally moving past the awkwardness, now found himself at a loss for words once again. His raised hands that were poised to reintroduce the Saibamen froze mid-air at the Saibamen's dance. In the next instant, Nappa slapped his raised hand against his forehead and sighed, utterly exasperated. God damn it, Alpha. I told you not to do that. I swear to God, I left you with Jinyu once for, like 10 minutes, and you got infected by his stupidity. Nappa was just about emotionally done with this entire mess. In an effort to regain control of the situation, Nappa clapped his hands once more. His expression was carefully blank, completely refusing to acknowledge that any mishaps had unfolded. All right, let's establish some ground rules. These will be one-on-one deathmatches, and it's first come, first served, Nappa declared. However, it became apparent that he had more to add as he gestured toward Piccolo and Tien, singling them out with pointed fingers. Namekian, Three Eyes, you two don't have to participate. Your power levels are higher, so the Saibamen can't win. I'll have them stick around for you in case you want to warm up or something. Your call. Nappa stood in a momentary silence, his gaze traversing from one Z fighter to another, waiting for a response. The seconds stretched into a minute, and Nappa's patience wore thin as he continued to wait for some form of acknowledgement from the Z fighters. After what felt like an eternity passed, a flicker of disappointment crossed Nappa's face as he realized that no one would respond to him. All right, fine, you party poopers. Decide among yourselves who wants to go first, and let's get this show on the road.